I mean, it was worse this morning. He might take it down, so maybe. Congratulations.
Well, Cedar Falls down south.
Yeah. It's only, you know, it's just in their news section. Short articles.
Maybe.
I've only. Yeah, I can. Somebody called me. Stay with the coast.
Yeah, nice to meet you in person. Doing good. Good. How are you?
Yeah.
Oh. No, very good. No excuse just for anybody in the district,
Oh,
right?
to be fair.
Sure, yes. Let's go ahead and put it out.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, they're in that way down. So I think mornings. How's mine is that. One. No, I think it's by this year. And Trish is pretty flexible. More in the early part of the week, because they're open Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
They don't open until.
Okay, we're kind of get started here. As like yesterday, we're going to bend the schedule some more, a little bit. So welcome to the next half day meeting, I guess, something like that, of the council. And again, thank you, Peter, for last night. You missed a great meal if you didn't show up, and you got a chance to see the wiki across the river, what it looks like. So it's great. So I'm gonna start. We got some new people here today, so we'll start with introductions all over again. And we'll do the same sequence as we did yesterday. So Glenn, you get to start us off.
Yeah, Glenn Dolphin with the Oregon State Marine Board, the Environmental Programs Coordinator, and SCP Marina.
Noel Bachelor, Oregon State Parks Ecologist.
Sam Chan, Oregon State University, and the Sea Grant Workshop Invasive Species Specialist.
Christine Moffitt, co-chair, Francis House School Research.
Chuck Fisk at Wildlife Control. Josh Emerson, Oregon DEQ, and I am the balance marker.
Nicole Brooks, Customs and Border Protection, Agriculture Specialist.
Alex Stump, Mosaic Ecology, and representing Multnomah, Washington, and Helen Clackamas counties.
Hector Rivera, Portland State University, Center for Lakes and Reservoirs.
Peter Canay, farmer, public member representing the Land Valley.
Patrick Singh with Public Affairs Council on your council staff.
Robin, you can start.
Robin Johan, I'm a contractor. I'm currently working on rewriting the Oregon State Aquatic and Species Management.
Chris Bowman, Oregon Department of Agriculture, manager for the State Christmas Tree and
Josh Mulholland, Oregon State Marine Board, oversee our environmental policy program.
I'm Will Lackey, I'm with Oregon Department of Transportation, statewide vegetation coordinator.
Wyatt, you want to introduce yourself?
Wyatt Williams, invasive species specialist with Oregon Department of Forestry.
Okay. And the people online, could you turn your camera on for a second and introduce yourself? And again, Eugene, we'll start with you like yesterday.
Eugene Weir, project manager for the Freshwater Trust and representing environmental groups from Southwest Oregon.
Let's see, we'll go order. Kathy, you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Kathy Pendergrass. I'm with NRCS with the state office in Portland. I'm a plant materials specialist.
Emma?
Hi, I'm Emma Scott, and I am a graduate student at Portland State University in Kat De Rivera's lab.
Matt?
Hey, good morning. Matt Parolic with the Port of Portland, natural resource ecologist.
Heidi?
Heidi McMaster with the Bureau of Reclamation. I'm the regional IPM coordinator.
Jennifer?
Morning, everyone. Jen Poirier, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I'm the Assistant AIS Coordinator for Oregon.
Oh, everything moved around. Lindsay?
I'm Lindsay Wise of Portland State University, and I manage the Oregon Invasive Species Hotline and the Oregon IMAP Invasives Program.
Michelle, did we get you? Okay, Michelle.
Good morning, everyone. Hey, it's Michelle Delpine from the West Multnomah Soil and Water Conservation District. I'm the Invasive Species Coordinator.
Reagan.
Hi, I'm Reagan Thomas. I'm a senior at Portland State University.
Rode, did I pronounce it right?
You're muted.
You're muted.
Sorry. I'm Rode. I'm an undergraduate in the Environmental Science Department at PSU.
Did we get everybody?
Looks like one person on the phone.
Oh, a person on the phone, whoever that may be.
Hey, yes, if you can hear me, this is Jessica Keys. I work for U.S. Senator Jeff Merkley. It's great to join you for a little bit this morning. I am based in Eastern Oregon, so particularly interested in the Eastern Oregon update this morning, but I also work on natural resources for the senator statewide and used to be a liaison to the invasive species crew when I worked for Governor Kulongoski. So thanks so much for your work.
Thank you, guys. Okay, I'm gonna pull it on this computer.
There's a hand raised on the screen too.
Oh, hand raised? Go ahead. Whoever raised their
Hello,
hand.
I'm Stacy Johnson. I'm the Bureau of Land Management Invasive Species Program Lead.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Okay, I want to get this over. I went back. I think I understood what you guys talked about. Does this rotation work? Yes?
I seconded.
You second,
Yes,
this rotation works.
So I'm saying for me, yeah. So do we need a motion?
Yeah, I guess we could, if everybody,
It was just a clarification.
there was clarification, so I guess it's already voted on.
I think so, 'cause
Okay,
we
yeah,
said, we said we would adjust.
Okay.
it accordingly.
Side will motion.
All right, then this is the rotation. And thanks, Glenn, for volunteering to start off the, Okay, we'll start with committee reports. Karen.
Is Karen on? She don't introduce herself. I don't think Karen was going to be here.
Oh, okay. Communication, who else is on the communication? Okay, we'll move to Christine.
You're up.
Surprise. Well, we discussed, I think some of the most important items in terms of this, yesterday, updating, and moving forward with a DLP regarding our, need for, indemnification and insurance issues, updating all of our committees that have not been effectively active throughout this last few months. So our goals are communication and updating the information on the web for members only, and getting a calendar that works for folks.
Okay, any questions for Christine?
Was there any updates needed in the bylaws, or we kind of?
Yeah, we-
that yesterday?
We talked about that yesterday,
Talked
so I
about that
think
yesterday.
we probably got that one. Unless if somebody has.
On the governance committee, was to be the chairs of our committee. For the bylaws? For the bylaws and legislation and the budget. No, the bylaws committee, I'm saying along them. Oh, who's on the bylaws committee? Which I thought was called governance.
Patrick, would you have that list?
Yeah, let's see if I can look that up.
Everybody else but me can be in the Bible.
Don't think we had it updated. We may not have.
I don't know if I have a list. I've got communications, education. So I guess we could seek volunteers for the governance committee to do the bylaws.
And so the vice chair is the chair of it, right? So
Yes.
Christine, I'll be on it. Bylaws, I believe.
We'll look at the other one. I mean, there's a list somewhere, I'm pretty sure.
Why did a lot of it updating the last one, like, you willing to be on it?
I think I didn't know. I thought I already was, but
Yeah.
Is it, we just have more updates? Yeah.
for the bylaws committee. Yeah, I mean, I'll do my best here. Who's chairing?
But I would be the chair. But we've got to make it fit with what we're doing
Yeah,
with all of the other.
I've studied it pretty well in the past, so it's not new to me, the bylaws, so.
Cat. Troy was on it before.
Yeah. It was not.
We'll look for an old list and get it out to everybody to look at. Update, because we need to update committees coming up in the new year anyway, so.
But it would be good to make some changes.
Yeah, we can make some changes. I think,
And then segue to Peter in terms of meshing with the legislative components of that too.
We kind of hit the legislation yesterday more, but you got more to add.
No, I don't,
Okay.
but, you know, just, taking a cue from William, you know, and David Blacksmith, learning to know all the new legislators is gonna be, and I hope they, sounds like we can meet them up in the Capitol.
Yeah.
And, I hope to get up there this winter session.
I got a question legislatively. So yesterday, you know, a very nice surprise was Brock Smith talking about a legislative concept for funding of the council. Did anyone else aware of that? Was the legislative committee know about that?
Definitely.
Well,
Yesterday was the first I had heard of it.
That's the first you had heard of it?
Yeah.
But it's.
So is he working with the council or is he just doing his own thing?
He sent me a draft, basically he's doing his own thing. And it's,
Communication with us would be good, Patrick. So if you're receiving a draft, you should be sending it out.
yeah, I mean, he just sent it to me yesterday, so.
Oh, just
I'll make
yesterday?
sure to send that out.
Okay, well then I guess that's not,
Yeah.
okay, so all of this is just kind of happening right now. it
Yeah,
sounds like.
yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
fair
So
enough.
it's $400,000 that he proposes to go in addition to what we normally get into the council. So we can have maybe the legislature can take a look at that and
Definitely have the legislative.
help make some suggestions to the representative before I think it's the final version.
To update people who weren't here yesterday, Senator Brock Smith is proposing legislation that would give 80,000 to the emergency funds, which we're currently at roughly 54. Add 100,000 to 100,000.
Looking like 400,000 for the biennium.
Yeah, 400 for the biennium was 480 when I figured out, because he was going to do 300,000 for the council.
Yeah, it's 100 for education and
Education.
outreach, 80 for emergency, and 300 for operations. 480 for the biennium.
And what are our operations usually?
Not at 300,000.
What, well, that's per biennium, so it'll be 150 a year. So where are we at right now?
Where we get 200,000, we got this biennium.
100 a year?
Yeah, but since this is where we talked about that, I would suggest that we kind of flip the numbers a little bit, and, because 80,000 in emergency doesn't go very far. So that should be a lot more like 200 or something like that to give us some amount of money to really do something. And we already get funding through ODA, and that's 200,000 right, Chris, that we get. So we have a budget and we pretty much can stay in that for the most part, unless if something really weird happens. Outreach and education, we always can use more funds than that, and so we don't have to pull it out of the council money. But the emergency fund needs a lot more money than 80,000. So I would push, if we have a chance, and this is my suggestion, to increase that to emergency fund at least to 200 and divide the other 200 between the other two or something like that. But at least get us some money, we can actually do something.
Is it possible that we could take advantage, I mean, if his proposal is for 300,000 for the operations of the council, but the emergency fund infusion of 80,000 is a one-time thing, does the 300,000 thing have some sort of precedent setting that might make that appear to be a regular contribution, biennial contribution? And if so, could we channel some of the excess into the emergency fund at discretion?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that one, we do, but that would be nice. But I'm assuming, and that's just my assumption, that it's for the biennium. And the way the state government, if you don't spend your money up by the end of the biennium, you may not be able to carry it over, it's gone.
You couldn't just slide it over into the emergency.
Yeah, and the savings account, that may have to be addressed, that we could start doing. And correct me if I'm wrong there, Chris, we can't do that.
No, that would probably have to be something that have a discussion about how you will actually allocate those funds. I mean, they put sideboards on that, but I think investing that in the emergency fund that's smart, because 80.
The other, a lot of times the state government, you get a lot of money, you know, like 300,000, then they go, well, you got money, so you don't need money. So it kind of, at least with our agency, we found that when we got a couple $1 million grant, basically, they cut our budget by that amount because, so it didn't help. So that's, I'm always worried that they're, well, you don't need it because you already have it tight. And I don't said that. President's personally, Sam.
And that model you talked about, you already have new money and then you have, and you think about existing money. Right now, the council is at 200,000. So Representative Brocksmith's $400,000 proposal comes in and they reduce that 200,000 right back to where we were.
Yep. Or the other, you know, in the emergency account, we have a lot of flexibility what we can do with it. And that can't be, it doesn't run out, it stays. So it may be something, facilities, just put it all in an emergency account and we can use it at our discretion better. So we need to farm money over to education, we can, because so we can do about anything we want with the emergency account. It's not, doesn't have a lot of strings.
It does, really, actually. If you look at the statute, if you want money out of the account, you have to produce an action plan for your project. And then the action plan goes to the council and get approved before the money can go to it.
Correct. But you can put an education outreach plan together with the, you know, where the council, would we not approve?
That's not an emergency situation. That's what the account's for, is emergency response to outbreaks.
But
Right,
outreach and
everybody else-
education is a critical part when an emergent pest arises, right?
Oh, sorry, wait, say that again?
So I'm saying when an emergent pest arises, outreach and education is a critical part of that response plan. So in that.
Yeah,
that would be
right.
part of that.
Yeah. But you're
You're
talking
right.
about operations for the council, right?
Well, I would prefer not, you know, we have, if our 200,000 comes in, we have enough to operate the council in most situations. It's when they cut our money or rob us is when we get in the financial difficulties that we've been in the past. So I wouldn't use it less, because we have grants and other things that we can use for operational services. But, so I guess I'll switch. I'm proposing we put it all in emergency fund and let it, and work through there. That makes sense.
Not really, but we can get the statute out and look at it to make sure.
Or divide it up so we do get a little bit.
That's just not, we've never done it that way before, since it started.
Yeah, Chuck?
Yeah, just clarification about the emergency fund, is it carryover?
Yes. It's, think about it as a savings account that we can draw from it. And so far it had 350,000 in it originally back in 2000. Sam, help me on this one, was it 12, 10?
20, I thought it was 2011.
2011. And now it's down to 54,000. So, and it's never been replenished, which we've talked about in the council for years, that we need to find some way of replenishing that fund. And that so far has never happened. We've asked before, and I know, but it's never happened.
I like the optics of asking for that full replenishment amount.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, bring it back up to 350 as was originally granted, you know, and then that reads well with your audience in terms of the number that you're asking for your concept.
And maybe that's something you guys talk to, see if we can put it somewhere else.
You know, and if there was with the annual appropriation, there was a continual addition to the emergency fund. It's not gonna hurt to build the emergency fund up higher than that. Because things are only getting more expensive.
Well, the original emergency account, we asked for 5 million. And we ended up with 350. All right, we can bring that up later. Anything else you want to add to this report? Okay, education outreach, go ahead.
We want to have Jessica from Berkeley's office see if she has.
Yes, go ahead. You can. Jessica, you asked for
Jessica from Senator Merkley's office, do you have any legislative updates for us on the federal level you want to share about what the senator is doing?
Hey, no, I definitely didn't come prepared. I apologize. I was just wanting to listen in and catch up on what y'all are working on. But if you have some action items regarding federal roles or needs, yeah, please circle back with me. And if folks there representing the federal agencies also want to circle back on any particular things that you'd like us to be more engaged in, I would certainly be really interested in that.
Thank you. Okay, Sam, you got anything for education?
Yeah, thanks. So in terms of outreach education, since the early part of the pandemic until just very recently this year, the outreach and education and communications groups actually worked and met together. I think it's a good model, and I think going forward, we might also consider that we continue that. They could still be two separate committees, but I found that many of the members overlap, and many of the topics when it comes to communications, outreach and education, there's a lot of synergy in them, and sometimes it doesn't make sense to have two parallel track groups that are actually working on similar goals, which is engaging, informing both our broader public and then within the council and within our own set of stakeholders. So going forward, I'd like to suggest that we consider that the two committees continue working together, and at some point in time, maybe it makes sense to actually merge them. But I think for now, let's keep them separate, because I think that provides additional leadership opportunities for our non-ex official members. One of the proposals yesterday was that our committees actually hopefully be run or be led by our non-ex official members. So in terms of outreach and education, I think much outreach and education really stems a lot from two things that happen. One is something that happened in the past, right before the pandemic, and when we received $100,000 to create the education outreach granting program, which was the original mission of the Oregon Invasive Species Council. When we were formed by the legislature, education was one of them, and then it was developing grants for education. Well, 2019 was the first year we had the ability. Obviously, the pandemic and the uncertainty with that resulted in those monies no longer being available. But yeah, we received 28 proposals in that process, and the proposals actually span the broader region, the entire states, from southeast Oregon and northeast Oregon, central Oregon, Oregon coastal Willamette Valley, the Portland metro region, southwest Oregon. And so that was unique in that the proposals represented a spectrum. I kind of call it a needs analysis for outreach and education for invasive species, and that's what we ended up getting. And they range everything from public engagement events like education through weed pool to rather very innovative events where we're working with youths from the native tribes and engaging them in invasive species education as part of internships to fire education. And so, a task group actually formed and we evaluated those proposals. And of those, we selected 10. There were more, but 10 clearly stood out as really highly fundable projects with high impact. And those 10 also uniquely in that they were represented the unique parts of the state, and they represented different forms from workforce education to prevention to even working with elected officials. And so we had a good spectrum there. Last year, there was a thought that we might actually, out of that $100,000, that we actually might have around $20,000 to reallocate back to those grants. And so we went and looked back at the grants and we did two things. One was, are those grants that were written back in 2019 still relevant as of 2021? Secondly, are the grantees, well, I shouldn't call them grantees, but the proposers, are they still able or capable of carrying out those projects? And the answer to that was yes. But obviously the funding wasn't available, so those grants are still in waiting. In 2021, we selected 4 that we felt could be funded partially with the $20,000. Ideally, the 10 proposals that we shortlisted actually totaled about $100,000, which is the original allocation. And so looking through the budgets, I think one of the outcomes from yesterday's discussions was that there possibly could be an opportunity for us to fund some of those educational outreach grants, which I think would be really essential for the council, because those are actually on the ground projects. And if we're looking for impacts, those impacts will probably come sooner than they are later. And so one of the action items that I'd like to have the council consider is to look through our budget to see what is available, if any, are to fund some of those outreach education projects as one priority. But the other priority is that we heard from Senator Fredericks and Representative Brock yesterday. They spoke to us, gosh, almost at length for about half an hour. And the emphasis was the need to really constantly inform, communicate, and educate not just our newly elected officials, but their staff. And so I think part of that education funding that we have could be to develop the appropriate type of material, whether that is web-based materials and also in-person type materials that we can actually provide for our legislators and their staffs, so that they understand, so I shouldn't say they understand, so they will be able to learn about the impacts that Oregon and the invasive species have on Oregon, and what some of the actionable items could be within the framework of their work. So I'll stop at that.
All right. Alex, are you going to hang out all day with us?
Yes, I am, but we also have some PSU students here that were going to be part of the present update on the hub.
Okay. Okay, I was going to move things around. Okay, we'll just start shoving things down. Alex, why don't you go ahead and get up and do your presentation now?
So I was actually working. Want me to step up there? Is that easy?
Yeah, wherever you want to go. And that way you do.
So yeah, Alex Tonch, co-chair of the hub. Yeah, I'll make this quick to keep us on track here, but the hub, we are rolling out best we can the publications of what was originally 65 different species overviews. We're actually going to be a little over 70. Some taxa groups, instead of doing 8 of the 10, may as well do all 10, right? So we've rolled this out to curators and tried to finalize these taxa teams. And everything is out there except for the plants group, which is one of the largest, getting that taxa team formatted. And then we'll start sending those out for revisions and publications as well. And the goal was to have 65 species published by November 1st, and then the remaining 60 by January 1st. And I think what's happening is, groups work at different speeds. I can get out information to folks at different speeds as well. So it'll probably be a rolling basis up through the end of the year, which is all right. But yeah, the goal is to get these species propagated on the hub, fill the different taxa groups, and really make it a resource that folks can engage in and learn from, which is pretty nice. And then I will be reaching out to the hub working group and the council about ideas about changing the structure even of alerts from the active, inactive to active and previous, and be able to change these structures and going through the notes and touching base on these structural changes that we've talked about over the last few years, that we have great ideas, but can we start implementing them? So the hope is the hub is propagated, and then we can start making structural changes or adjustments. And then one of those thinking of the future is when we get all these 165 or 25 remaining species published, our kind of queue of species to consider is empty. So the thought is, how do we decide what species will be published in the next round, whenever that may be. And it essentially answers the question of how do we continue to add species to the hub and why. So the group with cats, PSU class, the invasive species class, are going to help us answer that question. So they want to conduct a quick presentation here for folks to gauge your interest and get feedback about what may trigger species being added to the hub, as well as they're going to create a few species overviews so we can have something in the queue to add. Sam, you raised your hand?
Oh, yeah, hey, Alex.
Yeah.
I think, because some of the folks up here and those online may not be familiar with this hub, can you provide some background as what the purpose of this hub is and how it's going to be used and how is it relevant to, say, a policymaker or a manager on the ground?
Yeah, so it's the Oregon Invasive Species Council Invasive Species Information Hub. So it is meant to be a comprehensive resource for education and outreach and also reference. So it originated from our 100 worst invaders list, in which is a dynamic database now where species can be added, removed, alerts can go up, and also we can let folks and even policymakers know if a species will affect have health impacts, economic impacts, or pretty high ecological impacts. I think they all do. But that is one way to communicate this information, as well as provide updates on news releases, documents, and help compile all the awesome information out there into one species overview, perhaps. Yeah, Patrick, will we be able to share the screen? And Reagan, it'll be going to you, right? Or Rode?
Rode, yeah.
Can you explain how you're trying to be part of the Emerald Dashboard information as well?
Yeah, and guidance from the council how the hub should be involved is also great to get feedback on. But we're trying to reach out to taxa experts of insects that we have a group, some individuals being in here. Wyatt has been awesome on this, for example, and Nikki as well, but help provide updated news releases. I've only done it once, but provide updates to the alert, updates to the overview. Recently, I posted the live map that shows the data being collected in the Forest Grove area. So you get live updates of where infested trees have been found or where suspected infested trees could be found. So trying to get that updated information best we can to folks, and also working with Patrick to try to get the hub put on our Emerald Ash Borer page on the website so people can focus on that as well. And any feedback, especially from the insect taxa team, about anything that can be added to that profile is fantastic as well. That's kind of the point. And I've been emailing a lot of people a lot of things lately. So yeah, updates can always occur. Any other questions?
I'm
Yeah.
a little ignorant on this.
No, it's fine.
This is probably a question. So I understood that the hub, what you're probably working on the species profile, but based on what you're saying, the alerts and updates, for example, new detection maps, the updated versions, that's going to be embedded in the species profile?
So there's both. There's a table right even above the species overviews where you can scroll through what will essentially be 170 species maybe one day. But these are the alerts that really catch people's attentions, managers, policymakers, about those that we're looking out for now. And that's one thing I want to work with the working group and the OISC is to kind of change this is it should be like we talked seasonal alerts. So like EAB is up there as an alert, but it's you could say the dormant season, right? It's not the best time to detect this species, but and I updated it just the other day about, hey, this is in the spotlight for many reasons, so it will remain up here. But eventually that maybe in the winter, many species alerts will go to the, previous, and a new alert when the season comes for when to look out for the species will rise. And one question asked Rick in the crustacean group is, we have the northern crayfish as an alert. And it sounds like yesterday it's kind of all over the place. Like, should that be an alert again in the coming season? So it's trying to highlight species of interest to be as up to date as possible. Yeah.
Just one more follow-up on that, because the only active alert we have was June 30th for the ML-4. So we just, in terms of communication, do you see that in a feed into a series of press releases, or how does that, how do we do that?
Those are questions to answer. I think that's why moving forward, getting this alert field down, because Roy and myself, we've been talking about this a lot. Even was able to rope Jolene back in and have a meeting, but that's the idea. Like, how do we make, because the alerts, looking at them, we put them up, and then there's a column of when they are to expire or be readjusted. I forget what that attribute is, but when those dates come, then what do you do? And I wasn't there originally when the 3-month kind of window was created, but it's good to think about, right? And reevaluate what happens at that 3-month mark, and why is it 3 months, and would that date be adjusted? So if you click on that, I put kind of a disclaimer in there. I didn't want to make too many changes without consulting the insect taxa group on this. But because that's what I really want decisions to be made through the experts of these different groups. But kind of put a little disclaimer in there that it will remain on alert, even though the best season for detecting infected ash may be, moving into winter, right? So these are all discussions to be had, and I'll probably, my hope is at the end of this meeting is to give a written update for the council on the hub, because it's a big project and there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of more stuff that can happen. Okay, so I will move on to the Rode and Reagan. You've been patient, so let's go ahead and have you communicate to the group here about your project and the goals for this project, and what questions you'd like to have answered.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Rode, and I'm here with Reagan. We're both students at Portland State University, taking a bioinvasions management class with Dr. Kat De Rivera, and we're in partnership with Alex of Mosaic Ecology, doing this project where we are creating 10 species profiles for the information hub for the Oregon Invasive Species Council, and also creating guidelines to help decide how to add species to the hub. So currently, these are examples of 18 species that we are potentially thinking about adding to the hub. And today, a big part of our ask is getting your opinion on which of these 18 species, which 10 you think we should add to the hub. And we will talk about this a little bit later, but we do have a workflow currently that we are using, but we would also like your input on our workflow as well. And in the interest of time, I won't read off every species, but we've basically just categorized them into established species versus like their potential to establish and the type of threat that they pose to Oregon. And then here at the bottom left of the screen, we also have Reagan's email, who is our correspondent for the group. So for any questions or comments you may have throughout the presentation, feel free to email Reagan about those. So the criteria we're currently trying to establish for what to include, or maybe even more importantly, what to exclude from the list. We don't want to include species that are already established, although there are exceptions to that, just because we want to be able to apply EDRR And then we also, it wouldn't be as important to include species that don't pose a threat to Oregon or species that don't really have a plausible method for getting here. But we do want to include species that thrive in ecoregions similar to Oregon's, or if they are ecoregions that we think Oregon may have in the future due to climate change. Species that have negatively impacted nearby states, that spread quickly, that could do harm to key industries in Oregon, like livestock, or just species that may pose threats to human health or ecosystem health. So currently our workflow for narrowing down species to add to the list has been to consult experts. But like I said, we would like to refine this and fine tune this. So please give us your thoughts and opinions on this workflow. We have been talking to people from ODA, ODFW, ODF, neighboring states. We have also been trying to look into how a species could potentially be impacting ecosystems, economic systems, or human health in Oregon. And we've also been trying to determine how likely it would be that the species would be introduced in Oregon, and if it were to be introduced, how likely it would be to actually establish here. And then lastly, these are our questions for the council in addition to the ones that I've already posed. So like we said before, if you have comments or inputs, feel free to reach out to Reagan, whose email is in the bottom left here.
Yeah, the email is a little cut off from what we're seeing. I don't know if it's still in the title. You can.
Yeah, I can go back, or I can drop it in the chat as well.
Yeah, I think the chat would be a great place for it. And then when I do kind of do my next update to the Hub working group, I'll include this email in there and possibly this presentation as well.
Can you go back to the list of 18 species too? It was hard to see. And yeah.
So established, well, I can just point at kind of examples here, but established species, you have cheatgrass, Scotch brome, southern pink moss, oak lacebug. These are species that are here in Oregon, they're established. And we've always talked, do we put those on the hub in our database if they have certain impacts that are quite important? And then, right, what's the title of the second group of species with the Japanese beetle? We can't see that either. It's a little trimmed.
Oh, okay. It's potential to establish.
Yeah, and potential to establish. So there's the Houdini fly, Japanese beetle, Mediterranean oak borer, and then the potential threats not yet found in Oregon, such as water hyacinth, water lettuce, death cap, snake fungal disease, and variable leaf milfoil. So those are three kind of different categories of species groups, whether they're here, whether they're established, or whether they may establish, I think is what you were going for, correct?
Yes.
Awesome.
What about species that are not established in the wild, but are being sold? For example, water hyacinth and water lettuce, they are actually available in some pond stores.
I see them quite often at the nursery 2 houses down from me. Yeah, and to be clear, and we're going to update things, but water hyacinth has overwintered in the Rogue River, like it was a few years ago. I found water lettuce and water hyacinth in the Columbia Slough at relatively alarming densities. Removed it, never saw it again for years after. But these species are here, and getting these at least grouped will help. Maybe add those or have discussions about it.
Sam, are you considering that as even a fourth group? The sort of very high potential
organisms in the trade.
In the trade and in ecological match. That's great.
Yeah, I'd say maybe go to the end, the last slide with those questions, because we will move on here to let the rest of the meeting go. But Yeah, I think that these are insightful questions that the hub needs to, the hub working group kind of needs to dial in. And if we communicate with this group here that will help us put this in writing and create a workflow so things just don't get adjusted, down the road, depending who's the co-chair of the group.
Maybe we could send the list of species, if they want input from all of us on them, maybe we can just email that out to everybody.
Yeah, I think Patrick, could we put it in the meeting notes, something like that, so the whole council can have it? Yeah. Cool.
I would add a question to that, and that would be, is there a value in having a comprehensive list, even of those species that you may not consider completing a full profile for those that are established but not causing harm, or oftentimes we get people who want to know how many species are there even that are not native, and there is no one-stop shop for that information. And is it really ever going to be comprehensive, but is there value to at least plugging in those names and a descriptor that then tells you whether or not you're going to complete a full profile?
Yeah, I thought of that as, the hub can go in so many ways, but what if it was just a list of every invasive species in Oregon, right? But some are a little more, highlighted and more in-depthly described than others. And because you could also go off eco-region and break those apart, right? So it's a thought.
Your dad will work list.
Cool. Any other questions for this awesome group here that's helping us out?
Again, for the established list, can you go back to that? Sorry. So it would be helpful to see where it's established. Is it statewide or is it in one ecoregion? So adding that too, because that, like what Rob was saying, is if it's established, or maybe not essential, one thing I thought when Rob was speaking, is if it's established in some ecoregions and could be established in others, then that's still a threat of spread in Oregon that we might be more interested in versus it's widespread throughout Oregon, or it's in part of Oregon, but just wouldn't get to other parts based on tolerances. But I like the idea of, here's comprehensive list all the time. Is this in Oregon? I don't know. Let me go check an ODA, maybe that has it or whatever. So just having a one-stop shop could be really helpful. But we definitely don't need profiles of all of them.
And to help out, I will have that for aquatics.
Awesome.
So other taxa are on their own.
Well, that's the thing, all these agencies and groups are doing all this great work. It's like being able to compile it all into one place is the whole goal, so.
I may have a resource to offer on that too. I was building a Survey 123 app for our agency for mapping weeds and extracted all of the known invasive species present in Oregon, all the plant taxa, and could make that available to the hub as a pre-digested set of problems.
I'd like to make a comment about the distributions. So we have a data repository statewide in the IMAP Invasives program, and that was originally selected by the Oregon Invasive Species Council as a place to hold all this type of distribution information for all taxa across the state. And so I would really encourage anybody who is already collecting that data to get in touch with me, and so I can get that information loaded into that, and so it's all in one place in one standardized format. And IMAP also has a Survey 123 form for collecting data in the field that goes directly into that system. And so I think it'd be really helpful if people can refamiliarize themselves with that and spread the word about this being a place that already exists for keeping all this spatial information in one spot. And it really does help having all the taxa in one location. And then it helps to make decisions about these kinds of things, like where things are and where survey efforts may be best directed and other considerations like that.
Lindsay, can we get you to come to the next hub meeting?
Sure.
That'd be great to see how we can connect the two.
Yeah, and Lindsay actually contacted me after the June meeting, and I just haven't been able to connect, but I think utilizing IMAP invasives into the hub is a pretty smart thing to do. We just have to do it, so. Yeah, Lindsay, I do plan on bugging you quite pretty soon.
All right, thanks, Alex.
Yeah, thank you. All right.
Any other questions? Anybody on the computer have other questions? Oh, okay.
I have something else on the general topic, not on this presentation now. Before we move on. So for the, we have this grant from the Western IPM to expand the hub to include aspects about climate change and first foods. And we will, we have a class, another class group doing that for 16 species to trial expansions for climate change and maybe first foods, but definitely climate change. And Cheryl Schopenhauer is working on the first foods aspect, and Rachel Gregg is working on the climate change aspect with those students. And then there will be a survey that goes out to help select what species to prioritize for those. That, you know when that's going out, Patrick? Probably tomorrow, maybe? It's going to go out really soon, so please fill that out yourselves and spread it to networks. We'll send it out to the whole council and council network. But, and I think the Northwest risk as well, but please be on the lookout for that. For me, it goes straight to my spam every time I get a report. So.
Yeah, it'll be coming from Paul Schurz.
But it has some other name.
Maybe Nelson.
Yeah, it's Nelson Research or something. So we'll send out something that you're about to get it, and then something with a link, and you may have to dig that out of your spam.
So it can't be tied to, say, PSU, the contracts?
Well, the Qualtrics is run by, Nelson Research is a wing in our office that does polling research, that we have a data guru kind of helping with the doctor here and doing that. So that's why it's coming from Nelson Research. But I think we can get a link that we can then just send out to everybody to fill it out. Yeah.
What's that? Put it on our web?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be good too.
Put it everywhere.
Great idea.
All right, Rhodey, Reagan, and say thank you to Emma. I know she had to go as well. Thank you for sharing that and helping work out these questions we have to answer. Appreciate it.
We'll get some feedback to you by email.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move to the last board. So Chris and Wyatt.
Patrick, does the projector have a focus that you can adjust? Because I think it's slightly.
Yeah, let me see if I can.
Okay, thanks. No, that's why I was standing next to you.
I thought it was my old eyes. I'm not technical savvy on this stuff, so. So Rick, we don't have anybody from the Oregon. As far as I know, we don't. We need to bring him to the committee. We get a chair.
That's why I was there.
Well, it could be, we may move on.
know the 2 points. I did, yeah, real quick talk. Very sorry. Gas station.
I might be back soon.
Oh, yeah, okay, really. That's right.
but I'm just doing like, oh, that's involved.
Yeah,
Right
yeah,
off the ball.
yeah, yeah. Don't shoot your face around there.
He's good, he's fine. Fancy clicker. Alright. We starting?
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Go ahead. All right. Morning, everyone. Hello, everybody joining virtually. Chris Benjamin, Oregon Department of Agriculture. So I was kind of nominated to give the update for what's going on in the world of EAB these days. Wyatt is my co-pilot on this, so I'll probably maybe defer to him sort of periodically if he wants to chime in, and then he has some slides to share at the end. So first off, I just wanted to start to say this is not just an ODA thing. There are many partners involved in this effort right now, pretty much from day one. So this is just like a small representation of folks who have been involved in this to date. So I just wanted to start off with kind of that last thank you slide. Start off with the first to say thank you to everyone who's been assisting with this. And again, just a brief outline. I think hopefully no one's been living under a rock and is completely clueless about what's been going on with the EAB to date. However, probably have some folks who are joining virtually who maybe aren't filled with full details. So I'll just kind of go through a quick little background about how we got here, and then move on into more relevant stuff about the task force and things like that. For updates, I'll have updates from some of the subcommittees, but not all. Hopefully Wyatt can kind of help me supplement with some of that, because I wasn't able to get updates from everyone prior to this meeting, so I apologize for that. Just a brief overview, so hopefully this isn't totally new to everyone, but Emerald Ash Borer, Agaricus plenipennis, is the pest that we are talking about. As the name implies, it is a highly destructive pest on ash trees. Particularly, we are concerned about Oregon's own native ash, which has a high prevalence throughout the western part of the state, focusing in urban areas as it's a popular urban forestry tree, also in riparian areas, causing, basically flagging canopies, dieback of ash, or jewel beetle. It's a pessid. Very small, so it's hard to see. Just the penny there for scale, and part of the kind of classic symptoms that we're looking at or looking for when folks are out in the field are those classic D-shaped exit holes. Peeling back the bark exposes those classic S-shaped galleries, which are distinctive to this particular wood-boring beetle, and the little icon there is covering up that, but that is the grub. That is also, we also actually witnessed that in Oregon already. So basically just a quick snapshot of where it's been and where it's gone. So really just to say, in 20 years, it's spread to just 32 states. Oregon won the prize of being the 36th state to have EAB found just this past late June, late July. I'll just say July, technically it was June. So we are number 36. And really, we know that it was introduced into the U.S. probably through woodpacking material. So this is kind of that on a national scale. This is another problem that ODA, ODF, and others have been involved with, is working on the international standards for phytosanitary measures for woodpacking material to really to work on recommendations to increase the stringency of those heat treatments in order to prevent the introduction of other woodborne pests that are ravaging our forests. And part of the reason that not only is this beetle very adept at spreading and spreading quickly, but also just to point out that quarantines are not bulletproof. In every state that EAB was found, a quarantine was put in place. Beetles don't care about quarantine, so it really is the human vector as it sells, and we are just as equally as guilty as moving this pest around as the beetles are for flying around from their preferred trees to treat. There's a kind of a brief timeline of what chain of events had happened. So we know that it was first noticed on June 30th by someone who was trained from the Oregon Forest Pest Detector Program. So that's proof in the pudding that that was a valuable training opportunity for someone who then was able to observe signs of a beetle and was able to go, yep, I'm pretty sure that's EAB. He knew who to contacted ODF. Wyatt and Christine were over there, rapid response fire to go and check that out. Contacted ODA, who also confirmed that we saw EAB there. ODA was able to contact the school, who agreed to cut down the trees. They were chipped.
immediately. And just kind of fast forwarding to this, say that we had a public announcement out by the 11th. And I'll even admit from state perspective, this was a very, very fast response. I don't think I've seen really anything else happen this quickly before. So give ourselves a pat on the back for that. I briefed the nursery industry on July 14th. Their response was not surprised, but also a little concerned. I'll just, as a side note, mention that ash is not a big money commodity in Oregon, but there are some nurseries who do grow and sell ash, so they were of particular concern about that. And then since August, we've created our task force and steering committee who are meeting regularly to tackle the various challenges that have come along with this invasive pest. So these are just some images that I pirated from ODF and Wyatt. So just kind of the ground zero of where we saw the trees. These were not old established trees that were planted out at the Joseph Elementary School in Forest Grove, which was where the EAB was first observed. Relatively young trees, peeling back bark. We did see signs of galleries, and I think grubs are also observed, as well as a multitude of dead beetles. I think Wyatt even put out purple prison traps, saw lots and lots of beetles attached to those. All of that kind of giving us an indication that this had been here for a while. And so, yes.
What's the indicator for the dead beetles? What does that tell us? Is that just normal for them?
Oh, so that was from trap contents.
Oh.
Yeah, he had just dumped them out.
Okay, all right, okay.
That's how many beetles were trapped in 24 hours from one trap.
Wow.
It was like 200.
That's a lot.
From one trap in one tree. Yeah, 24 hours.
Right.
How many can, I guess, exist in an average tree if that's?
Thousands. Yeah, they overwhelmed their host, like group attack. So it takes thousands, hundreds or thousands, tens of thousands.
Could I ask a question about these trees? You mentioned they were younger. Is there a chance the borer may have come with the tree from another state, or would they have been arrived at the tree sometime after it was planted?
Yeah, I'm actually going to kind of address that on the next slide, but the short answer is we don't have definitive evidence for that.
And those are native Oregon.
These were
green ash actually, but this is at a school, and in the background is the city park, and there was a native Oregon ash that was also found infested the same day, or July 1st, next day. So yeah, it's in the vicinity of wild occurring Oregon ash that's also infested. Yeah. But these particular trees were green ash.
Right.
These two guys.
So, next one. So it's just an arrow view, just a Google screenshot of the school. And I had the area highlighted as the 12 kind of similar size trees to the one I showed in the previous slide. Not to say that I think AV was found in all of them, but in all of them.
Yeah, 5 completely dead trees, and the rest were pretty
on their way.
Yeah.
Where am I going with this? So we were able to ask the school. They did have records. They couldn't tell us exactly like how much they bought the trees and so forth, but they could say they planted the trees there in 2012. They knew where they procured the trees from, and that was from a local landscape nursery based out in Aloha. Unfortunately, we did contact that nursery, and nurseries don't keep their shipping records for that long. So they could not tell us where those trees came from. So we don't know if they came from out of state or if they were procured from another nursery in the state. So that is part of the reason why I say I can't say for sure that this was the point of introduction. It could have been, but we don't know. I think we've said that based on signs, we're kind of guesstimating that maybe 3 to 5 years is about the range in which we think the beetles have been, at least at these trees. And so if these trees were planted in 2012, that timeline doesn't quite line up. Yes.
Does the nursery industry import ash to Oregon, or they grow it here?
Mostly people are growing it for the most part.
So chances are these trees were grown from seed.
I'm not going to hang my hat on and say that they didn't get imported into the state.
So
we have
there is
people who
import?
bring stuff. We don't know everything that comes into the state. But yes, we have import notification requirements. That's always the struggle when you have 3,000 nurseries. Is every single one aware of what our requirements are? How are we to know if a nursery is not being compliant unless it's brought to our attention or we find it? So that's why I say it could have been from in-state, but I'm not going to guarantee that they came from state.
Is there a difference in attractiveness between a seedling tree and a mature tree? I mean, will they attack seedlings as easily as they'll attack mature trees?
I don't think people really know, but I think the educated guess is that it's a stressed, the most preferred choice to be a stressed adult tree, like a mature tree. But they will attack saplings as small as 1 inch diameter.
Yeah.
So they are known to be transported, they can be transported around the nursery industry, and live trees with 1 inch diameter.
And I know in our research subcommittee, that was a question someone had posed saying, you know, there are records of trees that small being infested, but what's actually the incident rate? So
Exactly.
really, how much of a flag does that really need to be? I don't think we have that data.
That would be low on the preference for EAV adult flying around. They prefer like 4 inch to 8 inch to 12 inch diameter.
Right.
That would be their preferred.
Yeah. And most nurseries that are growing ash, these would be small, very, very small diameter trees that they're looking for outplanting projects.
Biologically, it's possible, though.
Yeah, it's always possible. Yeah.
I really appreciate your presentation right now, but when I look at it, I think a soccer field and I see a baseball field. Anecdotally, have you asked the teachers or other staff there are there many people with pickups that might have firewood, you know, they're watching their kids? I'm just thinking of vectors and.
Oh, no, for sure. I mean, we always thought that EAB was going to give you because of firewood. So that's why I say it could have been firewood that was brought into the neighborhood, like you said, like someone from the school or nearby in the neighborhood, and then it jumped from that to these trees. It's possible. There's a lot of different scenarios. We're never going to know. And I don't think focusing on that is really going to, we could go down so many rabbit holes trying to
I'm
figure
just
that
wondering
out.
whether or not there's a continuous source of wood that, you know, from people who go that area and there's an infestation somewhere else.
Well, that's why we're doing the surveys, right? So this is not the only place where we're focusing attention. I'm just starting here because this is kind of like what first draw our attention to this situation. So basically, as soon as we found out about that, then we kind of like, okay, we need to get the word out. So we started working on press releases and so forth. And so I give credit to the council for sure, because this is really where your online hub shone, where this really, really came in handy, because just the phone line and not alone would have overwhelmed ODA. We would not have been able to triage all the phone calls that would have come in, because when this was happening, Northern Giant Hornet calls were coming in, JB is full on happening. So being able to direct the public to this online site so people could upload exactly where they were finding it, upload the photos, staff from both ODA, ODF, ODA, were able to respond to those in relatively short order and get back to people and be able to track what we were finding. This was really, really, really helpful. So I do highly appreciate having that.
I agree too. This is a success of the council right here. They can't be stressed enough, because when people hear about it in the press release, they want to do something. And even though they feel powerless, like this is something that people can do. Like I went out, found a green beetle. So instead of inundating like all of our inboxes, it gave us a team approach where I'm busy on Monday, but someone from ODA can answer it on Monday. And it was really, this is a very collaborative tool. So I'm very thankful it's out here.
This is great.
How many confirmed positives came in from the invasive species hotline?
From the hotline? I don't think any. So that's why I say these were grossly just false reports.
Not yet, but we're still getting them.
We're still getting them, but
I don't know if you have any numbers, but there are hundreds. There were hundreds of
Yeah, I
reports.
don't have the number there on the slide.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
That helps us know that it's not so terrible in lots of places.
So
That's
and
good.
Lindsay's on the phone right here, Lindsay Wise, who administers this, but Lindsay can crunch numbers and she can say, okay, this many came in for insects reports from June 30th till today. Or she can do it for, again, other taxa. So big credits to Lindsay out there. She can crunch those numbers and tell us exactly how many were submitted that were suspect EAB.
Yeah, there were like 300, I think, at least. And there was one that was positive, but it was very close to the original site. It was maybe a block or two away.
Right, yeah. So it was all kind of considered within that ground zero area. So that wasn't particularly alarming. Really what we were concerned is that having little other fires pop up wider, much beyond Forest Grove, that was a concern. So for example, we had someone call from Southern Oregon And so we had someone down there go check it out, and it was definitely a false report, but that definitely gave us a little bit of heartburn when we found that out, because we're like, oh no. So that was, I guess, the silver lining out of that part of the story, at least. And clicker. Stuck, excuse me. There we go. All right, so this kind of, with the hub and like I shouldn't say, the online portal and the high volume of false reports we were getting, I think it came to our attention, we really needed to update and re-release our EAB lookalike form. So that was something that ODA got on pretty quickly to share that information with the public that, we do have other native wood-boring beetles in the state that look very, very similar to EAB. So not everything is created equal. And I think that did help a lot, at least managing reports that we were having come in. That in conjunction with updating our fact sheets, getting those produced in both English and Spanish. Social media was huge. Like, I think that was something that, if this had happened 10 years ago, it wouldn't have been that effectual, but love it or hate it, social media is a very powerful tool for sharing information. So I was really happy to say I spent a lot of time after work scrolling on social media and seeing all the resources that we were producing and being able to see those shared with other organizations almost in concert was really nice to see. So I was glad to see that work was getting out. And ODF did a great job in immediately getting out there, holding town hall meetings, connecting with the urban forestry community, Tree City USA cities, and helping to get that information to those people as quickly as possible.
You've held a couple of town halls?
ODF did.
Yeah, for urban forestry.
Oh, not for the public.
No, this was urban forestry.
Have you thought about doing that? We did that with Japanese beetle.
Yeah, I don't know if Chris is going to
Try to get the public in, get them to interact.
We have these, well, I'll let you, we have a task force set up with subcommittees, and one of the subcommittees is a communications team, and so they're discussing that right now. I don't know if they gave you an update on the committee. I'm not on that subcommittee, but.
Yeah, they haven't given.
It's been discussed. We've had tons of little training opportunities for mostly professionals, like how to go identify what ash tree is, just the basics, and then how to identify emerald ash borer and how to report it. And, ODA has a nice form, survey 123 form, so we can train professionals, and there's been numerous trainings since June 30th.
You contacted all the local tree cutting companies and stuff, had them in? Great.
We're starting that now.
We have these
They're
subcommittees.
the ones out there in the front line, they could help.
Right.
Cut trees down and identify.
So Chris mentioned our very first slide, there's lots of partners. We have a EAB task force, and we've had 2 or 3 meetings now, but on the first one, there's 40 agencies. So it's much like if whoever was here was involved with the Asian spongy moth eradication in St. John's. It was similar to that, where it's just so we have Washington County, Clean Water Services, Tualatin Soil Water Conservation District, and they have a list of contractors for garbage. We're compiling resources.
Yeah. So we did that from the very beginning and ODF was really critical with that, helping us compile that as comprehensive as we could of a list of contacts of people who are going to be affected by this. But again, focusing on those that are located within the immediate area, because I'll be blunt, we don't have the resources to worry about what's going on down in Eugene right now because they don't have an infestation on their hands. Forest Grove does. That's going to affect Gaston and other neighboring cities. So that's where we need to focus our energy. That's just the reality of it. So anyways, we have all those partners at the table. That is the purpose of the task force, is that people have a platform to come, receive the information, understand what's happening, and if they need something, then to bring that to our attention so that we can do it. And that list is growing almost weekly. Yeah, Sam.
Yeah, so OSU Extensions has been working as part of the communications team. And so 3 things they're doing. One is that they're actually having presentations and also social media with the OSU Master Gardeners Network in every county. Same thing with the Master Woodland Managers. And they started doing some trainings with tree cutting.
Yeah,
the tree services companies. And they're limited in capacity on that. I think when he started doing that, I believe one of the associate dean was saying that, you know, you do have other jobs to do as well. So, you know, it's just a matter of capacity at this point.
I think you said it very well, Sam. That is true. It is a matter of capacity, and that's what that is why we need so many people involved, because no one single entity can cover everything.
Talk probably separate, but there's a training subcommittee, and Alex Gorman is one
Yeah,
of
he's on
the extension forces. He's chairing that, and he's working with Dave Shaw and Stark.
Yeah.
So they're now delivering, and there's already been, at least I've been part of 2 trainings for 150 professionals, arborists, landscape sodders, fellers, anyone who works around trees in Washington County. 150 people we trained, and Alex was part of that. So, and they're revamping more and more this winter. So talk to Alex, because he's really ramping things up.
Yeah, I think the main frustration so far that we're hearing from these stakeholders is that they want to do something besides, you know, look out and monitor. There's seems to be a sense of frustration that there isn't a.
Oh, believe me, I know.
Yeah, I'll stop at that.
Well, I would like to move on from this slide. There we go. Okay. So Wyatt kind of made a comment about this already before, but so this is the dashboard that he was referring to. So this is what ODA developed to kind of create a tool for all the trained professionals who we've been working with or already existed out surveying the area for EAB in and around Forest Grove. So this is real time, data updated readily. And this was a screenshot taken from yesterday. So to date, basically, these numbers are a little hard to see, so I apologize for that. So thus far, we're looking at basically 18 confirmed trees out of over 400, probably maybe almost 500 trees that have been surveyed within that area. So there's different classifications of how we're kind of ranking these trees, just saying like it was completely nothing, no evidence was found. No meaning like it's pending. And kind of differentiating between if it was yes, there were adult beetles present, or yes, if it was just larvae present. Do you have anything else to add about that?
No, it's just that on the right there, that pie chart on the right shows all the agencies that are contributing to this data. So just again, kudos to ODA. They developed this survey right away within the first week or two, and then they made it available to all the local on the ground agencies, all of the federal agencies, and that's what's reflected on the right. All the different players that are actually actively out there looking for this. They've taken the training, they know how to use the survey, and they're uploading data daily.
Right. So on that note, I'll add, someone might ask, is this available to the public? And the answer is no. And the reason for why that isn't is because we really want this to be accurate information, people who are trained and know what they're looking for. Again, that's kind of why we want to defer the general public to the hub to just flag things that they see as suspect, so that a professional can go follow up with that. And if they find anything, that can be marked onto this. So that is why this is not just available to everyone.
Looking at this, you know, there's one positive tree each in Fern Hill and the Glencoe corridor. I mean, how were those surveyed? Were they gridded through, or was it, you know,
These are all types of surveys, but most of them are haphazard surveys. There are people on the ground. And this is Emerald Ash Borer is a type of insect that leaves a sign that you can see 12 months out of the year. So you can go look at a tree 12 months out of the year. And these are trees that, who knows why, each one has its own story behind it. A lot of them are the local natural resource managers have been authorized to go out there, and they're just doing haphazard surveys. They go up to a tree, there's some questions you have to answer, things you have to look for, and on the form, there's examples of false positives and the positives.
Yeah, well, I guess I would just think that this is awesome because our employees work at those sites south of course.
Yeah, Alex, your crew took the training.
Yeah. They took the training, and so they're able to go and we click through and they're able to see these signs, the fact that you know, they upload the photos and descriptions right away. So not only do they take the training, but they're able to see what these actually look like and see exactly where they are, because they probably passed those trees over the years, you know? So I think it's great, but yeah, I guess doing comprehensive surveys of those natural areas is what I just would be interested in.
And that's happening. So again, I'm not covering every single little thing that's happening right now. So just as a side note, Clean Water Services, they have maps of all the watersheds in those areas and know where the ash trees. So they've been a key partner for ODA to work and help identify areas to survey. And part of that also is kind of connected to our efforts with the funding of USDA to work on biocontrol, because that is where biocontrol is going to, if it's going to be effective, it's going to be effective in wildland areas, not in an urban forestry setting. So that's kind of where that comes in, but I didn't get into that because that's not fully captured.
Yeah, and there's so much developing data, like, so Chris is touching upon that we have another subcommittee, we have 7 subcommittees. One of them is the survey and monitoring subcommittee.
So I haven't got to any of that yet.
And Cody Holthouse at ODA is chairing that, but OSU and ODF are trying to tag on some of these areas, these big chunks of land that are targeted for biocontrol releases to do monitoring plots. And so watching the wave of mortality go through, taking photo voice, doing active research like silviculture and replanting. These are all ideas that I'm having a meeting later today with some local entities at OSU. There's a landowner now, has 500 acres. He said, whatever research you want to do, come on out and do it. So these are all things that are developing daily. But,
and yeah, it changes so much, it's hard to even do like an updated, like a truly accurate updated report. And there's just so many people working at the same time. I can't be the central hub for all of that's happening.
You mentioned biocontrol. I think there's no biocontrol.
I'm getting to, so yeah, you guys are great. I'm getting to all the things. Yeah.
And when you identify a positive tree, is it cut down immediately and chipped? Are all these 18 chipped and cut?
They are not 18, they're not chipped and cut. It's not flight season right now. So that's not the risk. And it's not necessarily the best thing to cut a tree as soon as it's confirmed, depending on the time of year. Because if you just cut it, then you're just going to basically funnel the trees.
There was actually 16 at ground zero at the school, and those were chipped that weekend, cut and chipped and kept on. But the others, I don't know the status, but Chris is talking about the biology of the critter. Like there's a risk period, which is about April 1st till the end of September. That's when they're emerging and flying around. So May through September is when the adults can emerge. But then after that, they're kind of locked in place. So any tree that's found right now, there's a window opportunity to deal with it between now and the next time period.
What do you mean deal with it?
Well, whatever requires, whatever
so we need to
requirements
keep,
are in place.
Yeah, so we have to try to focus on keeping material in place, not having it moved, right? That's basically what any other agency or state has ever done in response to EAB, because it doesn't just magically disappear. It has to be confined somewhere. So that's part of also the work is where we're trying to figure out where we're going to have all these holding places for that material. How is it going to be used? Can it be treated? Can it be chipped? Can it be composted? Can it be incinerated? That's all information that doesn't happen overnight. We didn't have, yes, we had a response plan, but we didn't have all of these contracts set up in place for all of this to just happen as soon as someone found an infested tree.
Well, Chris, I was thinking also like some of those red dots that are confirmations are entities like Pacific University, the campus, or I know McMiniman's Lodge had one in town. And I think McMiniman's already paid to have theirs just removed.
Oh, I thought they were going to treat.
Or treat, okay, well, they're going to treat one at least. But
treatment.
I don't know, but I think some, I don't know, maybe I'm curious too. Is ODA leaving it up to the local, like, hey, we found a positive at Pacific University, then I'm assuming they're taking care of it, or like what's happening to the one in the city park too?
We're not required, we're not telling people what to do with the trees. That's part of what the BNPs and some of our other groups are supposed to be working on, the recommendations of that. If you're in this situation, these are the options that you have that you can do. But it's not for us to just tell people, yes, you are going to cut down every ash tree, either preemptively or after the fact. Because that's thousands and thousands and thousands of trees that we're talking about. So that will have to come down to the local municipality and landowners to make those decisions on how they want to do.
Yeah, that's when we wrote this plan. That's how we had it in there. Like we tried to warn communities and municipalities, like this is coming, start planning for it now, because you could have a whole bunch of wood waste. And that's the approach I've seen taken so far, is like we are accumulating databases of contractors and resources, landowners that are accommodating And then also matching together any sort of emergency funding to help out. And that's about it, really. I mean, I'm still, the quarantine and stuff, I'm sure you're getting to that, sorry.
No, it's okay. No, this isn't gonna take 15, 20 minutes. Turns out, also, I do want to move on because I know that there's other things to do. So just gloss over this really quick. I think part of it, just highlighting this here, Wyatt already mentioned the EAB response plan, which was originally published in, I think, 2018, and then republished in 21. ODF been monitoring for it. ODA's done some monitoring. Preemptively, ODA already kind of was thinking about biocontrol projects because, as you probably may or may not know, USDA deregulated Emerald ash borer in early 2021. So then that was when ODA started thinking about, okay, great, we don't have the federal protection anymore. What's the next thing that we can do? USDA kind of moved into the world of biocontrol for EAB. So we had already received funding for that somewhat, maybe auspiciously, right around the same time as when we knew that EAB was going to be here. So I'll talk about that a little bit in a couple slides. And just ongoing surveys, and then seed collection, which ODF has been doing, and I know Wyatt has some information to share with you, but we gotta have time. Doesn't make this time. Okay. Pressing buttons trying to get this to.
Do you aim it at that, maybe?
The mouse, but how do you want to use the mouse?
It's because that window's open.
Oh, there. Okay, silly. Okay, there we go. All right, so this is what I already referred to a couple of times. So immediately, because it's such a multifaceted issue, we immediately knew we had to have some kind of a structure. So we kind of have a tiered structure. So at the head of that, we have the steering committee, which has been made up of both state, federal partners, as well as Conservation Water Services. So that's kind of our local representative, which I mentioned before, as well as Oregon State. And then we have the task force. So we tried to accumulate a representative list of any and all partners within that affected area. I don't even know how many people are in the task force now. Technically, it's probably well over 40, 50 organizations or something, and that list is ever growing. And so the steering committee, we're meeting regularly, at least once a month at the first Friday of the month. And then the task force, we meet every Tuesday, first Tuesday of the month. And so we've had roughly 4 task meetings, I think, thus far. So these are the subcommittees that Wyatt mentioned. So the steering committee got our heads together and kind of tried to identify what are the main areas that we really need to tackle with and try to split work amongst ourselves to brainstorm projects, come up with tangible deliverables, identify resources, etc. Most of these, I think, are pretty self-explanatory. Really, a lot of the information producing is coming out of the IPM. So coming up with recommendations, whether that's pesticide use. So there is a list in the response plan that already identified a list of pesticides that could be used, but then ODA needed to go back and revisit that list to make sure that all those products were usable within the state of Oregon, because it's not the same across the country. So I know that they've been working on a pamphlet to get that out. So I should specify, the list has been available to the public for months now, but we needed a little bit more user-friendly, detailed information about how to go about using those products in particular. Survey monitoring, so that again is kind of going with the survey 1, 2, 3 trainings. That's tied in with biocontrol. Sam, as you already mentioned, training, OSU has already been taking the lead on that. And then funding, ODA has been part of that. USDA has also been a part of that, and that's kind of going to be the ongoing thing there as well. I pirated this slide from our colleague, Robert Emanuel with Clean Water Services, because that was something that kind of came up at one of our last meetings, is you can kind of get into that problem when you have too many cooks in the kitchen, and then it's kind of like you have the head not talking to the feet. So we needed to try to really talk about a better structure of how these various subcommittees are working together with the steering committee. So using kind of like the wheel analogy, it's a wheel and the steering committee is the hub, and then the task force are all the various spokes on the wheel. But we need to have this back and forth communication from the various task force, sending information, ideas, questions, problems to the steering committee, who then work collectively to kind of problem solve, come up with a better solution to do something. And if anything's ever approved and is ready for public sharing, that's where the communications groups come in. So they're working with OISC, OSU to get that information shared accordingly. And then part of that also is making sure that we're getting that information out to the public, which is also part of the communications group as well. So just as a general overview, this is going to be a marathon, not a race. And we need various different partners involved in this to tackle all the different situations that are going to come our way. Obviously, that is going to be a toolbox that will employ surveys, which are already ongoing, tree removal, which was already mentioned. Trapping will be a part of that, but just to note that traps are not foolproof. The lures are not 100% effective. So that needs to be done in conjunction with other methods to be really effective. And then, of course, the quarantine, which is kind of the only regulatory arm that we really have. And so that's being spearheaded by ODA. With the really only intent, again, eradication is not what we're talking about. We're talking about slowing the spread. We're slowing ash mortality, which is another mindset about that. And these are all going to change over time. As we know more, as the distribution spreads, we'll have to kind of revisit these things as they ongoing. Yes.
So part of the strategy is just the hard fact that emerald ash borer has never been eradicated. Is over 20 times, I heard 22 times USDA funded eradication attempts in its 20-year history here in the United States. So it's only been here 20 years. And the beginning stages, the first few, within the first decade, over 20 attempts, all of them unsuccessful. And so when it becomes established in an area, the fact is that it's already been there for several years, and it's always further than what people predicted it was. So that's the reality that we're dealing with. So when people say, well, what can you do about it? I hope they do something about that beetle. The best we can do is slow it down. Like it's not going to be able to be eradicated at this point, unfortunately.
Right.
But we can slow it down.
Do you know how much it has been slowed down for various attempts, and what's the most effective?
So Chris just mentioned SLAM. Deborah McCullough and colleagues developed this model and using like systemic insecticides and tree removal. And it's still being evaluated. It was developed in 2010, and 2019 was the first evaluation of it. But there is some benefit to slowing it instead of just letting it go. I don't have that paper in front of me, but there's starting to be more reviews of the SLAM. It was just proposed in 2010, and it's only been tested in a few states. So, but other states have really aggressively got on it when it's been detected in their states, say Wisconsin, Minnesota, and they'll develop the quarantine quickly. Beyond that quarantine, they redo the quarantine, boom, 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 until within like 3 to 5 years, it's across the whole state.
In Wisconsin, a lot of states removed their quarantines. So I think that's one thing I've learned is like Wisconsin, as an example, and Colorado both took down their quarantines in 2019. So they don't even have home quarantines.
That begs the question. If you can't do it, why bother to do anything? Why bother to waste your time doing anything?
Well, because some other clients have come to us to say, hey, we want to protect our streams. If you can slow it down until we can have the technology or the time to prepare, replant, harvest even. So there's another whole forest sector that says we want to get in there and harvest some of these over time.
Water quality, water temperature control for fisheries.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
Making that pragmatic point, but there's also other clients that want something else.
I only remove so many hazard trees.
Yeah.
How many years do you think it's been in forest growth?
That's what I said on the previous slide. So we think at least those trees, probably 5 to 7 years. How long has it been in forest growth? I do not know. And then I know that ODF did take cookies, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. For some dendrochronology to see if we could get an actual timestamp on that.
Trees are about 20 years old. Yeah.
So there's been no positives outside of the forest growth bubble?
Just along the border, basically, but yeah, no.
And Chris showed that map here to zoom out. ODF, our people that are on the ground in different parts of the state, we're already not using it. So Hood River all the way down to Ashland, like some of those trees, those 400 trees are now starting to get used more widely, not just forest growth in Washington County.
Right, yeah, because we've had other people reach out and say like, hey, we want our urban foresters to be using this survey. So again, we're not saying it only is to this area. We're just saying like, we just want people who know what they're looking for to be using it. So if you name another cities have trained urban forestry communities who want to be using this app, totally.
There are people all over the state looking for it, and one of it is because we train so many people with that Oregon Forest Pest Detector that the word is definitely out there. People that we trained are now holding their own trainings. Like it's out, you can't control it. It's
great.
Yeah, and so, but what I'm saying is people are definitely looking for it, and they're aware of the Invasive Species Council hotline. That's one we're still, as agencies, still saying, yeah, report it there first. That's a clearinghouse for reports. So people are looking for this. There's high interest all over. I'm kidding.
So it's not an early detection, really. It's kind of a response to something that's been here for years.
If you want to look at it that way, you can, sure.
Well, usually early detection means you can like handle it, eradicate it maybe, and that's right.
I think it's both, because it's so different depending on which critter you detect early. So it is an early detection because it's our first ever detection in Oregon. But now
Very rarely are we
preparing
in the opportunity to catch something upon first introduction, point introductions. That does not happen very often. Typically, it is after the fact. It's not ideal, but that's how it works.
Chris, is there anyone pushing back at, well, none of these other states has done this, then we're just, the fatalistic approach when we have, as Senator Wyden talks about all the time, the Oregon way is different. It sounds like you're kind of a mixed bag on this, but I see two poles, but nobody you're just saying, well, we probably can't do this, but we are doing this, and so how does that come together?
Well, I think it's here to stay, and that the communities, we've already started stressing this need to prepare for it now. So remove it off your city plantings. Get started, get ready for it. What we recommend for some cities is to do inventories, first of all. If you have a budget, you can treat prophylactically individual trees. And so I went on a tour in Shenandoah National Park where they have a Skyline Ridge, and on both sides of the ridge, there's this ash mortality going down into the forest, but right along the ridge is all healthy ash because they've marked trees and they have a inoculation program where they go and inject the trees with an insecticide that protects the trees. And they have like a $40,000 a year budget. And so they do that. So that's the type of recommendations that we're trying to prepare communities for. In other areas, there's just going to be a lot of ash mortality. So then how are you going to deal with that? Again, we tell people and communities ways you can deal with that ash or the wood waste. But other than that, I mean, there's other things that we haven't got to, like the ash seed study, conserving the genetics. There's people that are growing ash, our ash from Oregon and Iowa right now since 2019, and starting to look for resistance and breeding so we can get ash back on the landscape here. So there's a lot of both short-term things we need to do and long-term things to do. So you say, which is it? It's like a big mash of all of it. You're right.
And it's going to be a patchwork because some people are going to go to the nth degree to do everything that they possibly can, to do everything that they can when they can, and then there will be some that won't
I'm
be
sorry
able
to
to do
steal your
it.
thunder too, but
No, please.
ODA is going to start a biocontrol program, which is going to slow the spread of the AD naturally. So to delay that destruction or whatever, the amount of wood waste the community has to deal with, again, biocontrol is another IPM tactic. Without it, it would be faster. The spread would be faster. So we are doing things. It's not going to be the most satisfying answer to everybody, but I don't know if that answers your question, Christine.
I think the fact that Oregon invested in the readiness plan shows that it was a very sort of optimistic yet pragmatic approach to emerald ash borer and other tree pests. Right? It's not fatalistic, but the readiness plan allows, has guidelines for city managers to determine, okay, are there trees that we're going to treat prophylactically? How do we prepare for this? How do we diversify our canopy for this within this umbrella of understanding that we probably will not be able to eradicate it in or.
And some communities are better prepared for that, like Portland, they've had an active program for a long time, so they're well positioned to really kind of step into this and kind of start making moves in that regard. Whereas some other cities, they don't have a tree inventory, they have no idea.
But in the bigger picture, cities are a really small percentage of the ash trees in the valley.
Right.
They're gonna be a small percentage of the impact. It's gonna be the properties along the rivers. You know, I have 50+ acres of predominantly, and you know, I guess, I mean, I understand why they ended up with that plan, where they ended up with it. But it just seems to me that, you know, you got one chance. I mean, it may fail. I mean, the eradication may fail, but, you know, if we're gonna do EDRR, I mean, now's the time to jump on it. And, you know, deal with ash trees in a big circle around there. And if it doesn't work, we at least gave it a shot.
So if a landowner wants to clear cut their property, they can clear cut their property. More than welcome to do that if they want to.
But when you guys did your Japanese beetle, you went around to all the landowners and said, you want to treat your front lawn? And we had a couple of people say no, and then we went to court.
It's a lot more expensive to do the treatments for trees. So if you're doing that, you want to do it before the trees are infected. It's like $300 or so per injection, and you need to do that on a rotating basis.
So one thing, yeah.
But like Peter was saying, just clear cut them out in a bubble.
Yeah.
And just try and
In a model environment, I would agree. Or to go do systemic insecticide injections, you're right. This is the time. We're gonna do any sort of eradication. This is the winter, because it's been here already. It's only growing. So if we're gonna do an attempt, it would be this. But cutting down is not, it's just not feasible. I wish I could take you out there right now, because within 1 mile is the Tualatin River. And as you said, you have 50 acres. So there are literally tens of thousands of ash seedlings and saplings in swamps, in the river. It's not practical. If we were just talking like Baker City, that's where I was hoping we have our first EAD. Because then you could go and look at every single ash in that community. There's no native wild ash corridors. And now one of our positives is Gaston Creek, which is a tributary, probably not Gaston, Gales Creek, which is a tributary of Tualatin River. So it's in the Tualatin River watershed. So it's so cryptic. And that's I don't want to go down the pitfall of other states, because they thought, okay, it's right here, we found an exit. And they did their cut swaths, and it didn't work. And so, I don't know where I was going to go with that, but
then, yeah, like Peter was saying, if the game's over, then the game's over.
Well, then I invite you to come to the task force meeting and tell everybody that's there that the battle is lost. Let's not try.
If you're in Yamhill County, you don't like to hear that. You want to hear, hey, I hear it's coming. We can't stop it, but is there any way you can slow it? Yeah, we can introduce biocontrol. Okay, we'll do that. So that's what we're doing this winter.
Yeah.
There are other things you can do. Like maybe we could do some systemic insecticide injections just to show the community, okay, we protected some, but still it got out.
Right. So it
just comes back to that, you know, get 550,000 for treatment from the E-board. Well, it would have been better to invest 550,000 in EDRR over the last decade.
And that is the argument that your connection to the legislature can do that to support those arguments. Because I will say ODA tries for decades to promote and gain funding for our early detection rapid response work. We don't really have it. We do the best that we can with the resources that we have, just like everyone else does, but we cannot be everywhere all the time.
Yeah, and I don't think our representatives from the legislature are on the meeting today, are they? Because yesterday we had an amazing half-hour conversation with them, and they should be right here, right now, seeing this and saying, this is the wrong.
So Senator Frederick was one of the committee that approved the e-board fund. So I gave a presentation, talked to them about this.
We've got to try and get to them about EDRR. We got to get in the prevention mode of basis.
I do not disagree with you one bit, but that's the argument we've been making for.
We're gonna have to stop this and bring it back up in before the federal swine, because that's going to be shorter, so we can go back to the discussion. I have Gary online for the next presentation. I'd like to get him back in our order, so we can come back to this. So keep your questions, but so we can get back on order a little bit. and we'll bring you guys back.
Sounds good, thank you.
He's online.
Real quick, is every, all council members order? You can talk. Do that. Come on over here.
Okay, you want to bring, Gary, are you on?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Gary is our biologist down on the south coast, and he came to our meeting in Coos Bay and presented on what he was doing with smallmouth bass in the Coquille. And they've been doing a lot of work down there, so I wanted to bring Gary back to share what the new updates and what he's done. So Gary, I'll turn it over to you. You can introduce yourself and
So we do have our senators on.
Yeah.
So we need better EDRR.
Yeah, we'll do that later. Right now, let's get Gary on. Okay, Gary, go ahead.
Okay, let me pull up my screen here. Okay, can you guys see this? The PowerPoint? Okay. Yeah, my name's Gary. My name's Gary Bondro. I'm an assistant district fish biologist out of the Charleston field office. We cover the Coos, Coquille, and 10 Mile watershed basins. So I've been down here working in this position since 2007. And as Rick mentioned, he asked me to come in and give an update on our smallmouth bass work in the Coquille Basin this last summer. So just kind of a little refresher for those that were at the June presentation down here in Coos Bay, and I guess for those that missed that, smallmouth bass were first detected in the Coquille River Basin by ODFW in 2011. The map here kind of shows the South Fork Coquille Basin. Sorry, the red stars are the locations where we saw where we detected smallmouth bass, and the green stars are areas where we looked and did not see any of those. Weren't high numbers, but they were there. We did some sampling of those fish, got some scales off of them, and determined that bass had been in the river system in the Coquille for at least since 2009. So we know that just by reproduction. You see the first big year class got produced back in 2009. So probably some fish that were around a little bit before found each other in 2009, and the spread began. So this is a map of the current smallmouth bass distribution in the Coquille. So kind of down the center is the South Fork Coquille, where the previous map was, and since then they have spread all over the basin. So the upper reaches kind of varies depending on water temperatures, how cold or warm our summer is. And then going down towards the town of Bandon, they kind of hit where the salinity wedge comes in tidewater, and that pretty much stops them from going down any farther towards the ocean. So the other thing is that I presented back in June is we had our Coquille wild false Chinook. This is a graph showing our spawner escapement. So in the upper right, it goes back from the 1950s all the way to present. This one is to 2007. We were on an upward trend with our false Chinook numbers. Things were looking really great. We actually, in 2010, we had over 30,000 false Chinook that came to the Coquille that year. We had ups and downs, just like every other basin on the coast. And then in 2018, our population totally crashed out. And we did a big assessment and determined that we had some drought conditions, the warm water blob out in the ocean. So ocean productivity was really down. That affected a lot of other basins on the coast. But the big difference is we had smallmouth bass predation from an illegal introduction that nobody else was dealing with. So at the same time. So I'm going to get into what our work that we've done this last summer in the Coquille Basin. So just some of the bullet points I'm going to cover here. So jump in the first thing. We adopted, again this year, we adopted a temporary rule allowing anglers to spearfish for smallmouth bass throughout the Coquille Basin from May 22nd through October 31st. So really this was just a way to get more people down into the Coquille and harvesting more fish. And it's actually, if you never tried it before, it's actually pretty fun. You can find out how well you hold your breath, and I found out I don't do a very good job at it, so I need more practice. So this is just another opportunity for people to come. We've gotten lots of phone calls from folks that actually travel down here just for this unique opportunity. This is the only place in freshwater of Oregon where you can spearfish a game fish. So there's non-game fish that you can spearfish throughout Oregon, or you can go out to the ocean and like harvest rockfish, lingcod, things like that with spears. But this is the only place in Oregon for a game fish. So we're probably looking to make this a permanent rule in 2024. Just with the regulation process, we'll have to bring it up next summer. And that'll go in front of our Fish and Wildlife Commission for final adoption for a permanent rule on this, what we're shooting for. We also did snorkel surveys in the South Fork Coquille this year. So we were out there looking for young of the year, smallmouth bass that are basically under 2 inches long, which is the blue bars. The orange bars are bass that are 2 to about 6 inches, and then the gray bars are bass that are above 6 inches. So down below, we have these 2 different survey sites. We have Baker Creek to Beaver Creek, and then we have Beaver Creek to AP, which is a wayside area, Albert Powers Wayside. And then you can see we have the 2 different years. We have 2021, we did surveys in about the 3rd week of August. And 2022, we did surveys again this year, kind of repeating a couple of these locations. And you kind of looking at the difference, trying to get multiple years to see if things are changing or not. You can see there's definitely some big changes for both the Baker Creek to Beaver Creek and Beaver Creek to the Albert Powers. One thing is this was a cooler, wetter summer or spring and early summer. And we think this kind of affected the distribution of some of the bass. So, bass are a warm water fish. So any colder water, they're probably not venturing upriver as far as they did the year before. So this is probably something we'll continue to do, the snorkel surveys, to kind of evaluate, are we seeing changes? Are they a positive change, or is something else happening out there? We jump into removal of bass by using electrofishing. So the last 2 summers, previous summers, we used a boat electrofisher, which is a picture on the upper right-hand side. And we use that in Tidewater. And then this year, on the upper left is a picture of a raft electrofishing raft. And we borrowed one from the John Day ODFW office this year. And we use the raft to get into places where we normally can't get to. So with the motorboat. So we use this in the South Fork Coquille this year. So. And we were just kind of testing out just to see if it worked, and then decide if we want to pursue trying to purchase one to have here for ourselves or not. So just borrowing one made it a lot easier, that we don't have to go spend. I mean, the whole thing probably costs close to $50,000 nowadays. So one thing we documented this year was a lot of predation on salmonids by bass. Like I mentioned, it was a cooler, more water, wetter spring and summer. We actually got out earlier than we have the last 2 previous summers, and we actually started electrofishing for bass in early July. And so here's a few pictures of, the far left is that's a Chinook salmon that's in the mouth of a smallmouth bass. The middle picture, that's a juvenile steelhead that a bass had eaten. And the far right, that was a bunch of Chinook salmon, smolts that were being regurgitated from bass that were in our holding tank. So what we noticed was, what we saw is fish, smallmouth bass down to 6 inches were eating salmonids, and anything above that were definitely, having the potential to eat fish like that. So previous years, we kind of every once in a while saw 1 or 2, but it was pretty rare. We were out later in the summer. So, I mean, it was good to document this, but also it showed what we're dealing with and what we're facing, the challenges. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about the raft electrofishing that we used on the South Fork Coquille. We got on the water 8 times with the raft this year, and it was a minimum of a 2-person crew to do this, 1 person to row, 1 person to step on the pedal to to get the raft the electrofishing equipment to work, and then net the fish. As the summer came on, the water dropped, and we had to spend, a lot of times we grab another person to kind of help pull food through the riffles. So, we had lots of deep pools, but the riffles, you got to the point where we couldn't float through them, so you had to drag the raft through those areas. So the other thing we noticed is with the raft, we were pretty effective down to about 4 feet of water. And some of these pools get as deep as, probably 15 feet, maybe 20 feet in some of those pools. But if a bass was at like 5 feet, was 5 feet down, you'd see it. You go over the top of it, you turn on the shocking equipment, and the bass would just kind of look at you and swim away. So we kind of had to learn how to kind of herd fish into the shallows, kind of scare them up in the shallows, and then turn on the electrofishing equipment to stun them, and then we could scoop them up and process the fish. So, but out of those 8 days using the raft, we removed just under 2,000 smallmouth bass in the South Fork Coquille. And then this breaks it out into kind of length categories. So the 0 to 50, that's fish under 2 inches. And then you got the 150 millimeters, that's a 6-inch mark. So 151 and above, those are all fish that were able to predate on salmonids. So, but a lot of our fish were kind of in that 4 to 6 inch range right here, in that 100 to 150. So, and just noticing from others, there's not a lot of big fish, but there's a lot of those smaller fish that are out there roaming around throughout the river. So, we also, this year we did again for this is the 3rd year we used a motorboat electrofishing on the upper tidewater in the Coquille itself. This year we spent 34 days on the water, and some of those days we had at least 2 boats on the water, and we removed just over 4,000 bass this year. So again, we got the length categories, and the biggest category of fish is that 4 to 6 inch fish. So we saw lots of those. So we know for sure that these young of the year, under 100 millimeter fish, those 2 to 3 inch fish, we don't do very well at collecting them. A lot of times they're up in shallows. I'm sure there's more of them out there than what we're seeing. So kind of the same thing happened last year to us. We didn't see a lot of them, and all of a sudden they get big enough where they really kind of recruit into our equipment for capturing them. So this is a graph kind of showing what our removal efforts, what we've seen, how the fish we've captured over the last 3 years. Our effort we put in 2022 was much higher than it was twice as much effort as 2021, and about 3 times as much effort as 2020. So to kind of put things on the level playing field, we adjusted the numbers for 2020 and 2021 to the same effort as 2020 as this summer. So the blue and orange aren't the actual numbers of fish we captured, but if we put in the same amount of effort, we're saying this is how many fish we would have caught those other years. So, and you can kind of see, we have lots of big fish, and it really tapers off lots of small fish, and it's really tapering off on when we get to the bigger fish. This year was a little challenging, because the water was colder. We weren't sure if that was the actual fish we were seeing or fish were in different locations from the 2 previous years. We'll have to we're hoping that we're making some strides to at least reduce predation. That's the one thing is using electrofishing and all these other efforts. We know we're not going to eradicate smallmouth bass in the Coquille. We're just hoping to depress the population to some level and keep it to some level where it actually, give salmonids a chance to migrate through and get out to the ocean. So some other things that happened this year is we were approached by the Port of Coquille River. They wanted to hold a bass tournament or a bass derby. Smallmouth bass are a game fish in the state of Oregon, and there's some very specific rules on tournaments for bass. So we had to kind of work around those tournament rules. The tournament rules are basically like if you're giving a tournament and you're giving out prizes based on the size, number, weight, anything like that, any outside characteristics of a bass, then you have to follow the specific tournament rules, which is keeping fish alive, putting them back afterwards, which defeats the purpose of what we're trying to do. So the port really wanted to have a derby, and we kind of worked with the port and worked with our staff within headquarters to determine a way to have a derby. And so what we did is we came up with a way to tag fish internally, and we did that with pit tags, which on the left is a tray of these pit tags and a needle that we use to inject the tag inside the fish. The pit tags are the same type of tag that if you got your dog or cat microchipped at the vet, it's the same type of tag there that we're using here. So we would tag the fish, we'd put them back in the river, and each tag has each individual tag ID number to it. And so we gave those tag numbers to the Port of Coquille. They randomly assigned prizes to those fish, and as people came in during there's two-day events, one in July and one in September, and they could scan the fish for tags, and if they had a tag fish, they got a prize. So, and the prizes range from $50 up to $1,000. So, and some of the results from that, we tagged 51 smallmouth bass and released them back into the river. In the July derby, they had 6 tag fish that were brought in for prizes, and then in September they had 4 more fish that were brought in. And then while we're doing our electrofishing removal, we actually we ended up removing one of the bass that we didn't realize till we got back to the office was tagged. And when we looked up the information, it was removed or we captured it in early July or mid-July. And the fish we know the general area that it was released at, and it was released 7 miles upstream of where we caught it 2 weeks later. So we caught it in one location, we tagged it, the people moved the fish up higher to kind of spread out fish. And then 2 weeks later, that fish was back in the general vicinity where we caught it the first time. So they seem to be very mobile. And then one other thing we're working on this year, we were doing a radio tracking of smallmouth bass. So we had a project I've been working on with Pacific lamprey, adult Pacific lamprey. We were radio tracking those. That project was over. That research project was over. There was a bunch of leftover equipment, leftover tags, and we couldn't find anybody else that could use those. So those tags were loaned to us to use for tracking smallmouth bass. So we went out and captured and surgically implanted 14 surgically implanted radio tags into 14 smallmouth bass around the second week of September. And then the fish, the sizes of the fish range from a 6-inch fish to the biggest one was a 13-inch fish. And then most of those bass came from 3 locations in the South Fork, and then we had 1 location in the Middle Fork, Coquille, where we captured and tagged some bass. So we tagged those fish, we put them back out there, and now we're out there. When we can get out there, we're out there tracking the movements of those fish. So we want to better understand what those bass are doing. Are they staying in the same location? Are they traveling big distances? Are they all going to one location, or are they staying spread out? And having this information may help us in the future come up with maybe some better removal strategies. Let's just say all the fish leave the river, go down to tidewater. Well, maybe we can figure out a way to kind of capture them as those fish are migrating downstream. So just things we're trying to look into. So out of the 14 tag fish, we had 3 tags that have kind of gone missing right now. And then we had one fish that has been moving downstream Last time I checked, it was probably maybe a half mile to a mile from its original location in that area. So the tags are pretty small. So and there's a lot of rock and canyons in where these fish like to hang out next to. And what we found is these tags, the signal isn't very strong, so you have to be kind of close to find it. So makes, rather than just driving down the road with the antenna sitting on the truck, you got to kind of get out and hear, go and listen specifically for these fish. So if you're too far away from the road, we're probably gonna have to float some of these sections to see where we can find some of them. So I mean, that's kind of all I got. Other than, I guess, the other update is we're worried about smallmouth bass being introduced into any other locations in our district. So we've been working with some of our research folks, and we're doing some water samples in the Coos Basin, which is just north of the Coquille. And with the water samples, they're doing eDNA work and they're testing to see if we can detect any smallmouth bass from that. So hoping hope we don't get any detections at all, but if we do, we'll probably find out sooner than if we had to do it by just reports of anglers or things like that. So.
Thanks, Gary.
Yep.
Any questions from here and online?
So, you're essentially trying to limit the population in the Coquille. And, the Coquille is not the only river with salmon that has bass in it. I'm thinking about the Willamette here. They're managing it very differently than how ODF&W manages bass in the Willamette system. And are bass more deadly to salmonids in small streams like the Coquille as opposed to larger river systems like the Willamette?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of the big differences between like the Willamette and the Coquille is, and a lot of other systems in Oregon that have bass, is almost all these other systems are snow fed. Their water sources are snow fed, keeping the water cooler in general. Versus the Coquille we're all rain dominated. Our flows come from the rain all winter long, and they tend to warm up much faster. The Willamette is a much bigger system also. There's probably more areas for salmonids to kind of escape. Saying that, I mean, I think everyone knows that, bass are eating some salmonids in every system that have them. So, as we're seeing more and more effects of climate change, we're getting less snowpacked, I think we're going to see greater impacts on all these other Oregon systems, on smallmouth bass having impacts there. One of the other differences too is your salmonid outmigration timings. So the Coquille is a fall Chinook that migrates all summer long to go to the ocean, versus like the Willamette, a lot of those fish are spring Chinook, where a majority of them are migrating in the springtime. They're a year-old smolt and then migrating out on the high flows. So that also helps limit the amount of predation that's happening. So.
Sam?
Gary, what's the overall health of the salmonid populations in the Coquille area where you're doing the bass work? Do you have a baseline trajectory trends?
Yeah, so our fall Chinook are really in rough shape. We used to, before, prior to 2018, we averaged probably about 9,000 adult spawners every year coming back. And since 2018, now we've averaged 500 adult spawners coming back. We've actually are starting a conservation hatchery program to kind of help boost that population. So we're going out capturing wild fish, going to spawn them together, grow them to a bigger smolt, and then go release them back upriver to venture out. Our other populations, we have a healthy coho population. Our steelhead runs are pretty healthy. We have documented predation on both, coho juveniles and steelhead, but it's not the same level as we're seeing on the fall Chinook. So both coho and steelhead, they're spring out migrants, but they have, we have juveniles that rear in those bigger river systems, kind of the main South Fork. If there were no bass and the water was plenty cold, there'd be lots of them rearing throughout the summer through there. So.
Last question is, what is the Coquille tribe doing about the bass populations? Are they working with you closely on this?
Yeah, I forgot to mention that, and sorry about that. But yes, the Coquille Indian tribe, they are, we're partners on this project now over the last 2 years. They're helping out, either helping us, try to be on the boat as help, and then they've also found funding to purchase their own electrofishing boats where they're out there trying to help remove bass also.
Thanks.
Rob?
Would you say that there's a growing awareness among anglers of the potential or actual harm that warm water gamefish cause our native species?
Yeah, I mean, that was some of the Port of Coquille. They wanted, the Bass Derby to kind of help with that. We try to put out information, trying to get people down here. And for ODFW, it's really tricky because, yes, smallmouth bass are a problem in the Coquille, but warm water game fish are also a great opportunity in other parts of the state of Oregon where we don't have, native fish concerns. So there's lots of, inland lakes and ponds and things like that where they provide a great opportunity for angling recreation. So there's definitely a conflict between, I would say, the bass tournament community and what we're doing, down here. I know they feel like it's a threat to their tournaments, things like that. But really, we're focused on what's happening in the Coquille and trying to bring back a native population here of fish.
Questions? Anybody online? Okay, thank you, Gary. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks for having me. Sorry I couldn't be there in person today. So
That's okay. All right, let's take a break until 11. Then we'll get back, try to catch up on some time here. So.
So, in that worldwide, there's some pretty notorious pests all over the globe. So I know fair amounts of never been identified in that higher diameter of insects. So almost the species have exactly. So there is no there's most, I would say, health technology studies that develop. So for that group, so people are experimenting still with like these bait logs. So right now, the most effective one I've seen is you go cut a brush ash tree and hang it up with a crane or some other suspension device up the canopy. And that's the most attractive thing. Then you lower that thing down and you have to peel like a trawl knives. It's very labor intensive. Like you take fuel to peel these things and look for the larvae just starting to draw so you know. But realistically, to deploy that type of system, it's not simply hanging a trap in the tree and coming back in a couple of weeks.
Okay, that's good information. I'm sure a lot of
These are super, so like, rhododendron, and then you like somewhere up in this watershed, but there's nothing like that. And particularly containers, so we can test it extremely low density.
We were talking about at the same time, because there's this, well.
So it's like, so species specific, overall, I agree.
Fish monitors are.
back up and approach 7.
But it's massive.
Just for the technology.
So prevention, right? I was trying to look at my. That just seems like, we're gonna go through a point.
We had some federal quarantine all of 2021. So nurseries, Midwest quarantine, and they want to share cash.
Compensation, all that kind of stuff with this kind of touch. And what we're talking about is Arthur County in particular.
The guy trying to figure out what to do. So some nurseries did it with funding, so I might get the ones in this. Say we're still. Cities are not being federal, so it's just that coordinated. Just the states. So well, so that point.
Yeah, it sounds like that's.
Well, we don't.
Yeah. I mean, it's all just moving along, it's like, here.
Yeah. No, I shot given a try. No. No apologies necessary.
And then, in command structures, I think, with all the.
They're there.
Something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a good example.
I guess I would just, that's a conditions during the salmon. So, a viable chances of regulation.
I know, but we don't have any.
In this case,
knowledge that's
in this case, it's coordinated.
Well, but you said you wanted to communication with her That's not being done now. I can't. Oh. So, yeah, this is a new plan. I think that's plan. So we contract with J-Link.
But to look on. Just, to me, it's just so. If there's not coordination. Funding available.
That's right.
But once it needs to go out. That's why I did that.
There's not, it isn't already.
Which course is
Anyways. All summaries.
Thank you, Patrick.
I just saw it.
Yes.
Also, City of Hillsborough, they're the task force, so you say, aggressive Hillsborough. Yeah, that's, they tell the county, they're supposed to communicate, and they are, some communities are.
I don't know
Is that what the responsibility, is that Hillsborough?
They're going to get a little bit.
Girls been going for months, we're playing small banks, all those.
That makes it a little bit more sense.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I like that, just up and down, more volunteer approach. Trying to figure out where everything drives me nuts.
Yeah, I'll try to make it a little bit more since July 1st. So.
High five.
I said, every time also depends on where. Maybe find a bigger state. Horse programs. Where you, the first attack, that's the Dallas versus Astoria. And there's some reaction, different plan that you find. So that's something similar with you reading. Get bad news. But if you were to find it. Because there is no. You know, another one's gonna
Okay, let's get started.
Thanks, Chris.
All right.
Nice try.
All right, we'll just get going. And so we can get kind of caught up on time a little bit. Okay, basically, we'll talk, feral swine has been a success story in Oregon. In 2007, we had an estimated population of somewhere around 5,000 pigs, which doesn't sound like much when you're talking about the entire state of Oregon, but they were set up in certain counties. So it was a lot of pigs running around. And we were seeing a lot of damage, especially in the rangelands. This is all feral swine damage. Some down by riparian zones, up in their forested areas, by their ponds. And feral swine quickly can destroy property in the sense of rooters. And so they till it all up and now weeds come in. And we're seeing a lot of weed growth in these areas. So, so this is what we were seeing on the landscape. That one is one of the weird ones we found actually in Malala. That's not on the thing, but somebody hit it with a log truck. But anyway, that's what we're seeing on landscape. And the council, this is in 2007, Robin?
Who was here yesterday wrote it.
Yeah.
Oh, Dr. Mark Sitzman, no, it wasn't Ken, it was somebody else that wrote it.
No, it's good.
He helped. And they wrote this, and it was kind of a call to action, and they did it for the council. And so that kind of put a roadmap how we were going to do things. And it also created some tools that we needed. And so in 2009, legislative put some new rules out that helped us quite a bit. One we got rid of, you couldn't sell feral swine hunts. You had to inform ODFW if you had swine on your property. You had to come up with a management plan for your property. So it made a whole lot of things. The bad part, it didn't apply any funding with it. It just gave us all these go-tos. So we did that. And in the east side, they don't trust government for some strange reason. And this was, a lot of this removal plan and work was by word of mouth. One landowner would talk to the other landowner and the other landowner. We did have meetings and stuff, but this was a very much private landowners talking to each other. And so we used lots of different management tools. We used, and the most effective with aerial gunning. And we got very lucky that we had a private individual that had his own helicopter that liked to hunt pigs and coyotes, that on his own dime would come over and work the property for us. So for a couple of years, we had a helicopter owner that would truck his stuff over to Eastern Oregon, we got the permission from the landowners to hunt their property, and he'd go fly it. So we were getting on populations pretty quick, which was very helpful. USDA was part of it, but they only could fly like a couple times a year. And for a couple of months, he was coming out weekly to shoot for us. So that's how many pigs we had on the landscape. Very cool. And then we used trapping a lot. And our seed money for our trapping actually came through Oregon Hunters Association. They gave us funds. And what we were doing, we were coaching the landowners, especially Wasco County Soil and Water Conservation District personnel, and say, hey, we'll put this trap on your property. We'll show you how to operate it. And all you got to do is, bait it occasionally and keep track of it. Let us know if there's any pigs. And so ODFW had traps. I had on some land over there, I had like 4 or 5 different traps. USDA had traps. So we were covering Central Oregon with traps on these properties. And we had got as many as 22 in one trap in one session. So we were getting a lot of pigs out there. And then we also, people always wanting hunting. With feral swine, hunting is not ineffective. You guys they can't shoot enough pigs to do it. Which if you've not heard the news now, California is changing all their rules and the hunters are coming unglued because they're taking all the limits off pigs and opening up quite a bit. Something they should have done 50 years ago. They're finally coming on. And so we use arrow gunning, we use trapping quite a bit. And then once we got it down to a reasonable population, USDA actually came in and got some funding and hired a pig biologist who was very effective. And he could pick up the last remaining ones. And we also had a couple of hounders that would come out and help to try to locate the last few. Another thing that the council did was develop the Squeal on Pigs campaign. That was back in 2012, somewhere in there. Maybe early. It was, but we put on this, and it's a great campaign for outreach. Now for actual being useful, it brought our agencies more into property disputes because everybody was calling, oh, they got pigs on our property, they're feral, and it was a neighbor's pig that escaped. So we got a lot of that. Out of all the calls, we only had one that actually proved to be legit. Everything else was some neighbor lost a pig and go talk to them. But every time we get a call, we go out and look. Right now, mostly USDA does it. If they can't do it, then I'll go out and look at the property. And so we can react fairly quickly when we get to these things.
Are Washington and Idaho still using Squeal on Pigs?
Yes, but I'll tell you, got the next one, yes. Washington and Idaho adopted this. Now Montana and Saskatchewan's adopting. So it's becoming, when we started here, it's becoming a more almost nationwide. We got people back east. Everybody's interested in feral pigs now. So especially Saskatchewan, they found some populations, pretty good sized populations, and Montana's worried that they're going to come across the border. So Montana's on board with this quite a bit. So we were the start of all this. And but it's a great, it's been good for outreach. But again, for actual finding this isn't that great. Property disputes are always fun to get into. So like I said, we had lots of partners in this. We had USDA, we had BLM, Forest Service. I forgot to put our logo on it because we were a big council list. We had even Duper High School help us because we developed a new trap that we could actually, it's a round trap that we could put together, roll in the back of a pickup, drive out, drop it, put bait in it, and we were done in 5 minutes. And they built this for us and designed it so they're shop class. And that's one of the helicopters. That's a guy. The guy was funny. He liked doing this so much that he kept upgrading his helicopter to match it. I mean, it's nice to have that kind of money, but he upgraded. This is the second helicopter he had. The last one he bought was a Jet Ranger, and we still use him. He's on call, and he still would. If you want me to come down, I'll be down there. We just ran this down in Central Point. We got to get involved in a neighbor dispute, but the neighbor wasn't claiming their pigs, so we put our traps out, trapped his pigs, and they're gone now. But by Oregon law, if they don't notify their neighbors that they the pig got loose within a certain range of a certain amount of days, then they're considered feral. And the guy did not want to admit because they could be civil penalties for him, because the neighbors could sue for all the damage that the pig did on his property. And so he didn't say a word, but we pretty well know where they came from, and he has no more pigs.
Did you use the helicopter for that one?
No, but he was going to come and do it. I called him up and he goes, you know, I don't send an email. And he goes, oh, okay, I can come down this weekend if you want to do it. And I go, no, it's not that big a property. We already got a trap there. And we had them, the time we got the announcement, we had the place done in 2 months. I mean, we had all the pigs off of it.
Yeah, couple questions. Thanks for the update and the success story. The Californians, you mentioned that. How close is the next nearest population in California? And what's the status in Southern Oregon?
Back up here. Just this where's my map? Come on. Right here. This has been a mystery to us. Back here, we were getting reports all the time. I mean, biologists, you know, foresters and stuff were calling us and saying they got treated from pigs. I mean, that's how thick they were. They're gone. We haven't tracked, we haven't done anything. We do not know why. We haven't received any reports from anywhere in 10 years from down here. So it's a mystery, we don't know.
Rick, isn't there like a wolf pack down there in Klamath County or something?
That's here. And this predates the wolf pack. The wolf pack's new. The wolf pack didn't get them. When a pig gets adult size, they're very little, that's going to take them on. I mean, they're that mean and vicious. The piglets, they will. But, you know, a 150 pound pig, bear cougar won't take them on. They're just too mean and too ornery at that point. But so we don't know. But yeah, there's some populations down in Northern California.
Like how far? I mean,
Next county, like 2 counties down. But they move back and forth. And we had concern, especially below Boyce Reservoir. We had some population show up and then they just disappeared. We've done surveys and surveys down there and we just can't find anything. So we don't know if disease hit them. I mean, we know nothing, but they're not there. We can't find them. And the same happened down here, over here. They just, for whatever reason, they just appeared. So we don't know why. And carcasses don't hang around very long in the wild, so you really don't get to pick one up to find out was it a disease issue or something like that. But saying all this to bring it to, where are you? This is where we're at now. We haven't got any reports in over a year of anywhere. And we got USDA doing a lot of efforts doing camera traps all over Central Oregon, because North Central Oregon was our hotspot. You know, Wasco, Jefferson, that county. And we haven't had any reports in over a year. So we may get to December 31st. That's the goal, with no reports, because all the hunters are out right now. We might get some reports. Then we're going to declare Oregon feral swine free. Does not mean that we're done, because they can come back and they're very elusive. Yeah. So then we might have some hiding around that can start all over again. So we still got to be on the alert for them to get on right away. But the good part, we've done this for a number of years now, so we have everything in place that we can react within days, if not weeks, to some of these new populations. And the other thing I'll say, we're part of the Oregon, we're part of the transboundary feral swine. So we're working with Saskatchewan and Montana on their programs to give them kind of educate, because most of our information came from the east, how to trap pigs and stuff. And that's all agricultural land that they're dealing with. When we're dealing with rangeland, they're kind of a different beast, if you will. They have a huge home range. I mean, it's huge. And back east, they were always saying, well, if you don't trap the whole Sounder group, you're not going to trap them. Well, we found out if you move the trap 400 yards up the road, they'll come, you can retrap. We trapped our collared pigs Oh, one, he was really nice to us. I think we were trapped him 3 times. He brought buddies each time, so. Yeah, Judas Pig. Judas Pig. I'm gonna go to the beginning and I'll show you what the Judas Pig, he's one of our Judas Pigs. We put a collar around him. And the theory is that you put a collar, they're gonna go find their sounder group, their herd, and then you track them down and then you shoot the herd up. In theory, it's great. But pigs hide and they don't always run. They'll kind of get down in the brush like pheasants and wait till you step on them. So even in a helicopter, you know, we've had times we had the pig right under all the grass is laying down, the pig just laying there, they don't move. And then you step on them and take off or come at you, one of the two. And if you try to do it on by foot, they just outrun you. This guy wore me out so many times trying to keep up with him. But he came back to the track. He got tracked 3 times. And he always brought buddies, so that was a good part. So we give him his corn tree, let him go and shoot his buddies. So, and we found that with another, we had 1, 2, 3, we did 4 of them. And they all brought buddies back so it was really infectious. But they wouldn't ever get caught in the very same spot, but the trap next up. That was identical, everything's identical.
So Rick, what was the end result of your trapped hogs? I mean, your collared hogs. If you let them go, did you let them go?
We let them go, and then when we thought the life of the battery was going, we went on hunting them.
Oh, okay.
Or like the 4th time he got in a trap, 3rd time, we sent him to a better place.
One too many times.
Yes. We sent him to a better place.
Rick, with domesticated pigs, how many generations does it take to develop their own?
Within a couple, they'll start, you know, I don't know, most of our pigs were hybrids. They were Russian boar crossed with domestic. And we could tell that by they have a special molar tooth in there that you can tell if it's a hybrid or not. So most of ours were hybrid. We do believe it came from the canned hunt type farms because they were bringing Russian boars in. And so we believe that's where they got the hybridization from. But within a few generations, they start taking on the more characteristics, the longer snout, the more thicker, I call it hair rather than a coat. Their tail straightens out. You know, they take on those characteristics and they develop the bigger tusk. So it doesn't take long at all. So within a couple of years, you got a whole what I could call feral. But by Oregon, feral is not a species; it's just a definition. So any pig can be a feral pig by definition.
Rick,
yeah,
Kit's had his hand up here online for a while.
Oh, good.
And then I've got a comment.
Go ahead.
Hey, Rick, how you doing? I'm the one who helped Mark write the plan in 2006 and 2007, and I did a bunch of the research. And I just want to say, I think you're underselling how incredible of a deal this is. Like when I did the research, there was absolutely no populations that had been eradicated anywhere except for on an island. And so to get rid of populations in a non-island habitat is almost impossible. And so what's happened here is one of the biggest success stories in feral pigs around the world. Like I'm not joking or trying to use hyperbole here. This is pretty amazing. And the combination of hunting from a helicopter was your key, because any place that they've even come close to eradication, that's what they had to have. But they also would hunt with poisoned carcasses, which we can't do in Oregon. And so the trapping and that was really great. So I just wanted to say, like, this, we can't undersell what a big deal this is. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that too. Having done battle with pigs in New Zealand, I think that, you know, it's incredible that we're actually getting on top of them in Oregon. And then just to Wyatt's question about Southern Oregon, I used to see feral or wild pigs along the Siskiyou Pass, particularly on the California side, often in the fall when hunting. And I haven't seen or found any sign of them over the last 6 or 8 years. So it does, for whatever reason, whether people are hunting them harder in the oak woodlands on the other side there, they seem to have dropped off a bit from being, an annual sighting more than 10 years ago.
Yeah, the last sighting that we did confirm was right outside the city limits of Brookings. That was 10 years ago, over 10 years ago.
Rick,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to celebrate too early, but I'm already thinking about the press releases and the communications we're going to have around this, because this is a challenge that no one expected, right? This accomplishment, and to be able to tell this story in many ways is going to be really critical for this council and for your agencies and all the collaborators and the farmers and others who were part of this. So if we can work together, I think that'll be a good communication on the education project.
We're already there. We've brought the Feral Swine Task Force back together. So at the first of the year, if we can declare, then we're already starting working on that. We're all waiting for December 31st and have kind of a late Christmas present that nobody found anything during this hunting season. So far, knock on wood, they haven't showed up. But USDA has really stepped forward the last couple of years, and they're picking up the last remaining hogs that are showing up on properties when we find something. So that's been a great help.
I think too, working, the willingness of the private landowners probably needs to be really highlighted.
Yeah.
Because without that, I think you wouldn't have seen this success. And then you have an amazing volunteer who's offering, a helicopter. And so there needs to be.
Are we building stories about these people?
Well, we did, years ago, we did the award, Jeremy Thompson.
Yeah.
He was one of ours. He was one of the main people that was getting out onto the landowners in Wascosa County, and he got us a lot of access. And he was drumming up, he showed his success, and that got the next property owner on. The one area, we just started with one property owned by Jeremy's work. And within a year, we had all the surrounding, just because the guy talked to him and goes, well, they'll provide this, this, and this for you, and all you have to do is this. And it was amazing. And that moved, and we had his property, we had Lowell's, and then we had the next property across the road that had, man, we dropped a lot of pigs in the woods. And it just was success after success, and they would all jump in.
Just recently, Oregon Public Broadcasting's Ed Yon, and I think Yon, some of you probably have worked with him. He's the one who goes with Oregon Field Guide. He's their executive producer now. He said, I was asking about starting up, revitalizing the statewide campaign, and he says, well, that was a huge undertaking. However, we're interested in success stories or stories that have evolved. So I'm not sure what how your communicators work, but being able to maybe work with Ed on a follow-up story would be a really good documentary.
That's good.
That's also a great counterpoint for talking to the legislators, not just about, hey, we're really worried about this, but look at the power of the council and the agencies in terms of this. Especially since you're getting at populations of communities rather that are probably underrepresented in one of our invasive species, non-plant invasive species.
Yeah, the East Side success story.
It's great.
We don't have it.
And like Kit mentioned, when we started this back when I started, I was going, there's no way we were going to do this. And so it totally shocked me that we did it. I mean, the plan worked, which totally, plans never work. It seems like. So, all right. Any other questions online? Yeah.
One more, how are we going to prevent hunting clubs from reintroducing?
Well, the hunting clubs aren't so bad. Now, there is one little flaw in our whole scheme. And this is going to have to deal with ODA more. If you go online, there is still people selling pig hunts. That still happens in Oregon. But they use it by weight, so it's considered slaughter. So it's a wording, and so it's on their property, it's their pigs, and they are selling you get to choose your pig, which you know, like you're with a farm, you buy your pig and you shoot it, and that's considered a slaughter. So that circumvents our rules here, and they sell it by weight. There's three places in Oregon, 4ACES is one of the bigger ones that are doing this. So they found a loophole in the law, and we still got to plug that one, but I'm putting that outside. Since they're claiming them, they're pigs, that's by definition feral, but we need to figure out that loophole that, you know, 30,000 acre place is not confinement of a pig. You know, we need to play with that one. But that's a loophole they're doing. We got one guy in Northeast Oregon. He releases a pig out of his barn, and it's not really sporting, but that's what he does.
Wyoming does something like that with bison.
Mm-hmm.
They have bison hunts on private ranches too.
Yeah, so it's.
So you go out, pick your one, shoot it.
Yeah.
Like slaughter it.
It's slaughter.
Yeah.
Can it be part that they be tagged, that they have a radio transmitter?
We've tried and I've.
Ear tag or something?
Conversations. We have talked with ODA. I've talked with ODA several times. To one, define what confinement means. You know, 3,000 acres not confinement. It should be acreage. We talked about marking, that if you have pigs, you need to mark it. So then you can say, well, pig's not marked and it's feral, you can see it running around. ODA have not been interested in either one of those due to the industry. So I don't know where,
Are only males, only these males?
Well, yeah, you could do that, that'd be good, but.
What, is there something similar in Oregon for pheasant hunts? Like I know some states.
Yeah, you have put and take.
But it's on private land. And
private land, and you have marking, those things are marked, your birds are marked by rule.
Is there exotic species too?
Yeah. But, you know, feral swine are domestic and for meat production, so you're dealing with a whole different ballgame. Yeah.
Well, Rick, based on this hopefully being a success, is that an opportunity to go back to ODA with a proposal to say, hey, we want to close the loophole? We spent a lot of money in the last decade and effort.
We could, and I often talk to Ryan, their health specialist, and go, Ryan, can we do this? And then this is like yearly, Ryan and I will talk about that, and go, well, the industry doesn't want to do it, ODA doesn't want to do it, so it's the same thing. I would doubt that the industry.
What's the reasons why they don't want to do it? I'm just curious.
I don't know for sure. My guess would be cost, for one thing.
Putting your tag on?
Well, it doesn't seem like a cost, but when you're in an industry like farming, you're trying to pinch your pennies anyway.
Well, these guys are selling hunts for what, thousands of dollars?
Oh, no, they sell by the weight. They don't sell the hunt. They sell the weight of the pig. That's a whole different matter. See, if they sold the hunt, you know, they said it's $1,000 to hunt, then we got them on our rules.
Well, they said it's like a 3,000 acre property and they're going out on that 3,000 acres to look for them.
Yeah, they got them. They know where they're at. They take their client out there. The client shoots. Their guides are certified butchers, which by rule you have to be a certified butcher. And so they've got all everything covered. They were really slick. I mean, in my opinion, they figured it out. They figured out how to use the rules, and they're using it for their benefit.
A meat hog for 750 up to 200 pounds, a premium hog 900 up to 400,000. A Russian hybrid trophy hog 1,000 to 1,500.
Is that 4ACES?
Yeah.
That just sounds, like hunting. It's just.
We've run sting operations in these places with OSP trying to find something, and we can't. That deals with our rules. So it's in ODA's lap kind of in that sense, but I don't know. I can't say. Sorry.
We might have some guessing.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I'm going on. We'll go to green crafts. Yeah. Let's see.
Because I know Wyatt had some stuff he wanted to cover, but I don't know if
We got an online presentation.
We got online, probably not. Review and update every next.
I didn't mean to like.
One thing I want to say is, Patrick is kind of coordinating the task force meetings we've had so far. And Patrick, isn't it true that you and ODA, are we going to put some materials up on the OregonEAB.info?
Yeah, I've got a meeting with Jim Kurzbach in your office.
Yeah, so
next week, so.
At our last task force meeting, we decided to put, I think it was consensus that to put the minutes from the EAB task force on the council, it's not a council website, but it's administered from our council coordinators at OregonEAB.info. So if you want to find out more information, like the current update from the task force, that's where it's going to be living. OregonEAB.info.
Okay, let's move to your meeting to draft. Sorry, I went over. I get excited about this.
It's great news too.
Yeah, that's great news.
Yeah, that's so great. So Christine, who's all doing that one? Okay, and I think Steve is on this. Steve Romero. I'll let you guys take it over, whoever wants to.
Oh, Steve's there.
There's Steve.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you great.
All right, great. Well, thanks for the opportunity to speak with you today about the current status and update regarding the European green crab in Oregon bays and estuaries. We presented to you back in, I believe it was in March, just an overview of the issue and actions. I presented in particular actions that were proposed later that week to bring before the Oregon Fish and Wildlife Commission. And so I just wanted to provide a quick update on their actions and then to bring you up to speed, provide an update on the national effort to develop a green crab management and monitoring program. But before I do that, I think Kat, do you want to provide some background and